noting that the time noting that the time is 5:31, I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, commissioners and members of the public, staff, and others for joining us for the regular meeting of the San Diego County Independent Redistricting Commission. I'll begin by asking our clerk, David Hall, to provide additional information about today's meeting. David.
Thank you, Chair Beam. I would like to invite any members of the public who wish to provide oral testimony during today's meeting to please review the instructions posted on the redistricting website at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. We'd ask that individuals who wish to speak submit an online request to speak form in advance for planning purposes. Having said that, all timely requests from the public to speak made at today's meeting will be honored. In addition, agendas, minutes, and supporting materials for the Commission's meetings are posted on the redistricting website, including instructions to request translation. Meeting agendas are translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, Laotian, as required by law. Chair Beam.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is the roll call. David, could you please call the roll?
Thank you. And before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all commissioners are participating via teleconference, and as such, all votes will be handled by a roll call vote. I'll ask the commissioners to please unmute your microphone and say here or present. Chair Beam.
Here.
Vice Chair Katarina.
Here. Sorry, here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Dostal.
Here.
Commissioner Hansen.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Pons.
Here.
Commissioner Russ.
Here.
Commissioner Serbin. Thank you, Chair Beam.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is non-agenda public communication speakers. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Commission on subject matters within the Commission's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action the Commission may take is a referral to staff. As a reminder for commissioners, this means the IRC can't vote to approve any items that are raised by the public under this portion of the meeting today because it's not on the agenda, but commissioners can ask staff to follow up on any questions and can request to add items for consideration at a future meeting. With that, David, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda items today?
Thank you, Chair Beam. We did not get any members of the public requesting to speak in advance of today's meeting. However, if any member of the public would like to address the Commission on items that do not appear on today's agenda, please raise a virtual hand by clicking on the raise hand button on Zoom or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by telephone. I would also like to note, Chairman, that the Commission received 5 e-comments that were distributed to the Commission and posted online, and that the Commission's log of ex parte communications received has been updated on the website. Not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes non-agenda public comment.
Thank you, David, and thank you to those members of the public who sent in e-comments. We look forward to continuing to have our colleagues in the public submit those kind of comments as they feel appropriate. So with that, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 10th, 2021 regular meeting. Before we turn to any questions and then a motion, David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this item?
Chairman, none in advance of today's meeting, but again, if anyone would like to address the Commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on this item.
Very good. Commissioners, any clarifying questions or informational requests on the minutes? Very good. As this is an action item that requires a motion before any discussion, let me ask if there's a motion for approval of the minutes from the June 10th meeting.
So moved.
Commissioner Chen, second by Co-Vice Chair Garcia. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Very good. David, could you please call the roll for a vote on this motion?
Thank you, Chair Beam. Commissioner Russ? Commissioner Russ, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, did you call on me? Did you call on me, David?
Commissioner Russ, yes.
Okay. Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak,
Skip, I wasn't here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Chair Boehm,
Aye.
Commissioner Inman,
Aye.
thank you. Commissioner Serbin, I believe, is still absent. Commissioner Katerina,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Chair Boehm, that motion passes with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you, David. Thank you, commissioners. The next item for our consideration today is agenda item 5, entitled, and bear with me, discussion and possible concurrence with the Source Selection Committee or SSC recommendation and intent to award a contract for public outreach and engagement services. In a few moments, I will turn to Elizabeth Bustos, who served as chair on the SSC for this RFP, or request for proposal, and who will provide an update on the SSC's recommendation for contract award for IRC concurrence and approval. First, I'd like to review briefly, as we did last time, the IRC's RFP process, in this case for this particular contract. As you all know, a consultant for public outreach and engagement is one of 2 key services that the IRC is procuring through the RFP process. The work of the public outreach and engagement consultant will, of course, be critical to seek and encourage broad and diverse community input during the redistricting process. On December 18th, you'll remember staff gave us an initial presentation with proposed options for the competitive procurement of redistricting contracted services. On January 14th, based on requests for additional information from commissioners, staff presented additional options that mirrored the state CRC process, allowing for a more public procurement process. The IRC also formed an ad hoc committee that developed a 3rd option for the process. On January 28th, the IRC approved the 3rd option as recommended by the AHC, which allowed for 2 specific ad hoc committees to be formed, one for each RFP respectively. The flowchart of this process is displayed here. This flowchart also refers to the SSC for the Public Outreach and Engagement Services RFP, which actually began its work on June 4th. The SSC held several meetings and has now provided a report to the IRC with details of its evaluation of each proposal. This report included how the SSC reviewed and scored proposals based on the IRC defined criteria in the RFP in order to present an award recommendation to the IRC. And that is where we are today. Down in the bottom row, the second yellow box from the left. So under this process, the IRC has 2 options: to either conclude today that the SSC did accurately apply the scoring criteria, or that the SSC did not accurately apply the scoring criteria. If the IRC concludes that the SSC accurately applied the scoring criteria, the IRC should concur with the recommendation, which will then move forward towards negotiation and award of a contract. On the other hand, if the IRC concludes that the SSC did not accurately apply the scoring criteria, the IRC should not concur and should provide an explanation for that decision. The SSC then would reconvene to review scoring and return to the full IRC with a revised recommendation or proposed alternate action. With all that in mind, it is now my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Bustos, who served as SSC chair for this RFP. Elizabeth is the community development liaison for the county and currently serves as the lead for the county's COVID-19 response, working with community and faith-based organizations and rural communities. She's here to provide a summary of the SSC report and recommendation for contract award, and I'm sure we'll be happy to entertain any questions after her presentation. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Bain, and good early eve, commissioners. It is my pleasure to be here with you today as chair, representing the Source Selection Committee for the IRC's RFP for Public Outreach and Engagement Services. Once again, I am Elizabeth Bustos, Community Development Liaison for the county's Health and Human Services Agency. In that role, I report to the Director of HHSA, serving as a member of the executive leadership team, partnering with other senior leaders to develop and drive forward the key strategies of the organization. My professional experience includes 30 years plus of developing and implementing culturally responsive community engagement strategies that are grounded on principles of equities that place community at the center of the change process and ensure that those most affected are involved from the beginning, from the start. Thank you for that slide. The SSC was composed of 5 voting members, all county employees with work experience that qualified them to evaluate the proposals for this RFP and complete the work of the SSC. Information about the positions and experience of each SSC voting member were included in the full SSC report. Their names are also shown here on the slide. And as you can see there, in addition to myself as chair, Abdi Abdillahi, Tracy DeFore, Rosa Rascon, and Roberto Ramirez. The purpose and role of the SSC was to carefully evaluate each proposal in accordance, I should say, with the evaluation criteria provided in the RFP as approved by the IRC on April 18th, and make a final recommendation for that contract award. Slide 3, please. Thank you. A total of 2 proposals were received, and they were from Asian Business Association, San Diego, and Global Urban Strategies, Inc. There were several categories and criteria which were used to evaluate each proposal as adopted by your commission. The first criteria was minimum requirements. This category was an automatic pass-fail and simply required confirmation that the offerer met the requirements of specific elections code sections regarding contractors. This was also the offerer's acceptance of the County of San Diego's terms and conditions, draft agreement, and insurance requirements as stated in this RFP, or acceptance with exceptions that are acceptable to the county. The second criteria was the offerer's experience and qualifications. This was the evaluation of the offerer's experience providing services of a similar scope to that of the IRC's requirement in the statement of work, with an emphasis on providing outreach and engagement to California counties, cities, political subdivisions, and redistricting commissions. It also included the extent of personnel experience relevant to providing services to a similar scope and the extent of which the offerer's experience demonstrates knowledge of relevant redistricting requirements pertaining to California counties and San Diego County in particular, cities, and other political subdivisions. Finally, this criteria also included the evaluation of favorable references that support the offerer's stated experience relevant to providing high-quality outreach and engagement services similar in scope to the IRC requirements. Next was the offerer's technical approach. This was the evaluation of whether the offerer will deliver comprehensive, high-quality, innovative, low-risk, efficient, and effective public outreach and engagement services pertaining to redistricting. This criteria also included evaluation of the offerer's approach to outreach and engagement in San Diego County that will facilitate the engagement and participation of the public in the redistricting process, as well as whether the offerer had the capacity to both accomplish the tasks assigned as in the required time frame and adapt to unforeseen changes to the project schedule, timeline, and workload demands. The final criteria was price. This was the evaluation of the proposed pricing schedule and whether it was reasonable, stable, comprehensive, and predictable pricing that limits pricing risk or variance. Details of the review of these criteria for all proposals are included in the full SSC report, which was provided with today's agenda materials. After careful evaluation of each proposal, the SSE recommends awarding the contract to Asian Business Association San Diego, ABASD. the SSC concludes that the proposal from Asian Business Association San Diego provides the best value for the county. ABASD, their proposed subcontractors, and personnel were considered to have experience that demonstrated their capacity to perform to expectations as it relates to the provision of outreach and engagement services of the nature and scope required by the IRC. ABASD's general experience in conducting broad community outreach to a range of stakeholders across multiple communities was considered to support their overall capability to perform to expectations of this project. ABASD proposed a technical approach that was considered to be advantageous as it related to both the broad provision of public outreach and engagement services and the facilitation of broad engagement and participation of the public in the redistricting process. The information ABASD provided clearly demonstrated their capacity to perform at or above expectations. The proposed fixed price of $149,000 was considered to be favorable when compared to the estimated baseline price budget of $200,000. Pricing and costs were considered to be predictable, which limits the risk or variance to the county. Today, as SSC Chair, I present an award recommendation on behalf of the SSC to IRC, for IRC, I should say, review and consideration. This concludes my report at this time, and I will turn it back over to Chair Bain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that presentation and thorough briefing. On behalf of the Commission, let me please express our appreciation for the time and contributions you and your colleagues provided to this process by serving on what I'm sure was a rather intensive SSC. It's really appreciated, so thank you for that. Next, I'd like to ask commissioners for any questions they might have to clarify anything they saw in the documentation in your agenda package or in Elizabeth's briefing just now. With that, the floor is open. Commissioner Pons?
Yes. Again, thanks to the team for selecting the ABASD. My first question, I have two questions. The first question is about the makeup of ABASD and the subcontractors, and it goes to the issue of diversity. In your review of the company and the subcontractors, what degree of diversity did you find and discover or lack thereof?
So if I may, Commissioner, thank you for that question, that important question. We reviewed their ABASD's proposal through a holistic lens, if you will. And key to that review was an understanding that by definition, their work would need to engage multicultural, multi-ethnic communities throughout the region. So we really took a deep dive on that. The roster of subcontractors that they presented that included community-based organizations with deep, also known as trusted messengers, diverse trusted messengers in the community, did demonstrate a wide range of representation for our multicultural communities, as did their overall approach in an understanding that they would absolutely need to partner with community organizations and trusted messengers that were heartbeats on the ground to be able to follow through with this very important piece of work. I'm hoping I'm responding to your question. Organizations, and I will pause with your permission if you will allow me to call out some of the subcontractors that they presented. If I may, do I have your permission to take a look?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Subcontractors that they do have relationship with and intend to leverage those relationships include Urban League of San Diego County, Rice San Diego, Convoy District, San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, the Chicano Federation. Additionally, also working with founding members of the Strategic Alliance of San Diego Ethnic Chambers of Commerce were also listed alongside with Alliance San Diego. And they really represented what we felt to be a robust partner network, outreach partners as they defined them, of 50 plus community-based organizations throughout the region.
Thank you very much. I mean, I know that we're going to be the face of the outreach and engagement process, but otherwise they already know who's going to be behind us as the engine moving this process forward. So I think that's very important. So thank you very much, Ms. Bustos.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you from me as well, Commissioner Pons, appreciated. Right now I have Commissioner Russ, Commissioner Diaz, and I want to check for a moment with other commissioners, especially those who might not be able to raise their electronic hand. Great. So Commissioner Russ, then Commissioner Diaz. Commissioner Russ.
Yeah, that's quite a job I think you did, Elizabeth. As I look through it, there's a lot to consider. There's a few apples and oranges, but I did notice that this wasn't even close. When I look at your scoring rubric, even though Asian Business Associates was a bit more expensive, it was quite a bit higher than the global. Was there any one thing that really popped out at you that Asian business could do better than global? Thank you.
And if I may, sir, thank you for that question. You're right. There is quite a difference there. I will say though, and I will affirm that the same evaluation criteria was applied to both submissions, both proposals, and have to state that the deep connections that ABASD has already in place and ready to leverage in support of this work was really quite evident throughout their narrative. This presented as an organization that had either already deep contacts themselves throughout the region or had successful partnerships with other organizations, individuals, town councils, again, going back to the trusted messengers, all relationships that they are at the ready to leverage. I'm hoping that, and the deep local presence was evident. I'm hoping that answers your question, sir.
No, it does. It does. I noticed the golly, a long list of local organizations. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. I have Commissioner Diaz, then Co-Vice Chair Garcia. Commissioner Diaz, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Mrs. Bustos. I wanted to ask a little bit about the timelines and the comparisons between both proposals. And I saw that on the Asian Business Association proposal, there was a very definitive timeline of 8 weeks. And I just had a clarifying question if that, I know they mentioned it would be flexible, but I wanted to know how that compared with the other proposal, if it was lacking or if there was something that was presented to clarify what that timeline would look like. And it seems to me that a lot of the ramping up because of the delays of the census data will occur quite possibly in the fall. And it's just a very crunched timeline. So I don't know if 60 hours, it says on week 7 to 8, approximately 60 hours for a host in-person virtual meetings to collect input, if that would be flexible and actually potentially extended given that timeline.
And thank you very much for your question, Commissioner. I have to state that I don't recall the specifics of the other offerers' timeline. What I do do reflect on and actually recall that what was evident throughout the narrative of ABASD was their capacity to literally hit the ground running with the work, number one, based on the infrastructure that they already had in place. And then number two, very, very clear statements around their capacity to pivot and to look back to the IRC or report back to the IRC, should there be necessity to pivot and adjust, with the understanding that they would be looking to the IRC for grounding and guidance. Does that respond to your question, ma'am?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you both for that and for the previous exchanges as well. As always, this is very, very useful and appreciate the insights. Co-Vice Chair Garcia next, and then Commissioner Kugliak.
So I also had a question about the Asian Business Association timeline, but first let me just say thank you for your presentation. And I was also impressed by the ABASD proposal and by their what looks like their partnerships with a broad variety of other organizations in San Diego. But I'm just, and I apologize if my question is naive, but they specify on their page 3 of their proposal the description of services and the tasks and activities to be performed over an 8-week period. And we actually have a much longer than, and you know, half of that, which is understandable, is the prep, you know, the just figuring out who the target communities are, developing a schedule, developing the materials. And then they have only, you know, creating the printed materials, they have only week 7 and 8 as the period of time during which they will be doing in-person or virtual meetings, which really doesn't accurately reflect the work that we're going to need our outreach consultant to be doing. We have 7 public hearings that are going to be happening probably over 6 or 8 weeks, I would think. I'm guessing here. And then we have public hearings that we have to hold over the draft maps drawing period. So I'm curious to know how that aligns with our needs, how this timeline aligns with our needs, and how their bid, the cost of their contract, is going to perhaps increase. I'm sorry if I'm not being very clear in my question, but I'm just a little bit confused because this timeline doesn't really jive with my understanding of what the consultant is going to be doing. That's question 1. I have a second question, but I'll let you answer them. I'll stop there.
And so thank you, Commissioner, for the questions, or for the thread of questions. I did want to go back and to the previous inquiry and clarify that while SDABSD, and forgive me, I'm not saying that right, did submit a timeline, and we're talking about the 8-week timeline. Global did as well, but did not give any time ranges. And so, you know, and so that lack of specificity on behalf of the other offerer was taken into consideration. In regards to clarifying questions regarding additional clarifying questions that you have, Commissioner, there is going to be an opportunity for the IRC to meet with the contractors and have that, I want to say, virtual. I would still probably that virtual conversation where you're clarifying questions and others can be posed directly
Okay.
if to SD to ABASD should the recommendation move forward.
So understand that I'm not at all, I don't have any problem with the recommendation of the SSC, and I completely concur with the higher score that the ABASD received as opposed to the other offer. So that's not my question at all. My question has more to do with whether or not the $149,000 or whatever it is, whether or not we're actually not going to actually get the work done for that, and or are we going to be able to negotiate during this the period when we're basically negotiating the contract? If that's a time or a place where we would be able to make sure that what they're going to be offering us is actually what we were looking for, or when does that I'm just trying to understand, you know, A, the costs, and B, the services that we're actually contracting for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Commissioner, your clarifying questions make absolutely good, very, very good sense, and thank you for that. I think with that, and to receive a greater detail as to what those follow-up conversations would look like, I'd like to call on my colleague, Melanie from DPC, who I believe you're on.
I am. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so to the question regarding what capacity or what can we bring into the discussion when you meet with the, the ABASD, we will have an opportunity through the negotiations to talk about the cost and the price. And we can say, what can we work with? Can we ensure that for the $149,000 that you've proposed, we would ensure that these deliverables would be met? So we have an opportunity through the negotiation process to get tight, to get accountable, and to say, what are the deliverables, and an ability to modify that and then resubmit for that. And then we would tighten it. But this isn't just a 149, let's sign. We have an opportunity truly to get in there and negotiate that, to get it tight. And if we have that concern, we can clarify in the price exhibit. And I don't have one in front of me. I'm not sure if it was sent to us by deliverable base or if it was a cost reimbursement. We could get tighter in that and make sure that we drill down to that to make sure we get the accountability and the cost. But you're right. I mean, if the costs were to go up, right, we want to, well, at what point? You know, we want to stay within, what was it, a $250,000? Was it up to $250,000?
200.
200.
I think it was. Okay.
Yeah, but I would recommend we could do that through negotiations.
Okay, and just to be clear, in the statement of work, we did specify a minimum of 7 public hearings and then 2 public hearings during the map draft, the draft map phase. So those 9 were specifically called out. So sorry to be taking so much time, but I just want to understand and I want to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. And certainly 9 meetings would be hard to hold in 2 weeks, which is what their timeline currently specifies. So just wanted to raise that issue and be clear that I understand that. And then my second question, sorry, just has to do with, I'd like to understand how confident you are that, and again, ABASD, I think, had this, no question in my mind, the stronger proposal. But what I did see, or what appeared to me to be the case, was that they did have a very strong network and a lot of experience in the city of San Diego. I'm a little bit concerned about their ability to really reach out into the farther regions of our county, especially into the rural areas. So is there anything that you can tell me about that I might have missed in reading their proposal?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Actually, you did read, you're on point with your thorough reading of the proposal. We did take a look at their proposed, their roster of subcontractors, and going back to town council relationships that throughout the county that are very, very, as you know, as everybody knows, are very, very local. We interpreted that entire network as being robust enough. And to be able to carry through this piece of work.
Great, thank you.
And before we let that go, my thanks to all three of you for it. I do want to just confirm with Elizabeth, Barbara, and others as their staff on the call, the negotiations, should we concur today, the negotiations that would follow would incorporate the latest up-to-date planning and thinking of the commission, including the tentative schedule that we've got before us today. So the negotiators would be able to draw on that as well as today's discussion in going through those details and the negotiations that Elizabeth and Melanie described, correct?
Chair, if I may, I just see Melanie can confirm, but yes, with the input that we received today from the commission, we will make sure to share that with DPC. And Melanie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. I mean, really, when you're ready to go into negotiations, you're going to plan that right with the team. When we get together, let's talk about the negotiation points. We want to make sure cost is right there, ensure that the scope will cover those meetings as was mentioned earlier, but we'll develop a negotiation plan quickly. So once we can potentially award and let the protest period work its way out for the 5 days, and we'll be ready to go with the discussions.
Very good. Thank you for that. And again, thanks for the exchange, and thanks, Co-Vice Chair Garcia, for initiating it. I have Commissioner Krugliak, and then I don't think I have any other inquiries for clarifying questions. So I just want to let commissioners know, following that, following Commissioner Krugliak, we'll probably shift to any public input or questions or comments, and then take up a motion. So Commissioner Krugliak, please. Thanks for your patience.
Sure, thank you. And I apologize if you already answered this question, but can you describe how the reference check process is done? Both offers submitted reference checks, and I was just wondering how the SEC goes about executing those reference checks. Are they phone calls? Can you just kind of go into a little bit of specific detail about what those reference checks look like?
And if I may, thank you for the question, Commissioner. May I ask you, Melanie, to come right back in and describe that process?
Hi, no, not at all. So when we do reference checks, generally, we could assign a technical advisor to assist. The technical advisor would have to be part of the committee. And so the reference checks can generally go out via an email to answer a list of questions. It could be an email and then a response back. And then when those responses come back, that is reported out to the committee.
And just to confirm, that is what was done in this particular case, and all of the references for both of the offers did reply?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. Both offers were contacted by DPC representatives. Responses were received, and very, very quickly, the SSC was then reassembled, reconvened to take a look and do deep dives at those responses, And again, if I can just do ABASD came back with a robust list of references that spoke to their capacity to perform this important piece of work.
Great, thank you.
Chair, if I may add, just to clarify, the reference checks were done by technical advisors, not necessarily a DPC, but technical advisors to the SSC. Thank you.
Barbara.
Good, thank you for the dialogue and thank you for the clarification. Okay, seeing no more requests from commissioners for clarifying questions, that's your last invitation for it. Good, thank you all for that. I'll now ask David if we have any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. No requests in advance of today's meeting, but if anyone would like to address the commission on this item, you're welcome to do so. Please raise a virtual hand by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom, or press *9 if you're dialing in by telephone. And I'm not seeing any request to speak, so this concludes public comment on this item.
Okay, very good. So because this is an action item, we will need a motion. I think given the tenor of discussion, it will probably be a motion for the IRC to concur. So we'll get that in some form up on the screen in just a moment, but very briefly, there we go.
So moved.
And Commissioner Chen's already ready to go. I just want to give commissioners a chance to note that. I probably should read it briefly for the record. Concur that the SSC accurately applied the scoring criteria defined by the IRC for all proposals received in response to RFP 10926 for Independent Redistricting Commission Public Outreach and Engagement Services, and with the SSC Notice of Intent to Award to Asian Business Association San Diego ABASD. So I have a motion from Commissioner Chen. Second.
I'll second.
Co-Vice Chair Garcia, Katerina, sorry. Very good. Discussion. Any comments, any further points to make? Co-Vice Chair Katerina, please.
I just wanted to say quickly that, and I'm not speaking for our entire ad hoc committee, but I'm really happy with the quality of their subcontractors and the quantity. I think it's exactly what we were looking for. That was it.
Thank you for that. While I give commissioners just one more moment to think, I will add something that I should have added last week as well, more explicitly, that I want to compliment again the SSC on not only applying the criteria so transparently and clearly, with reference to the statement of work and the RFP, as several commissioners brought out, but also for being able to provide the background and anticipate questions. I'm going to attach a fair bit of importance to the SSC's evaluation that ABASD is willing and keenly interested in receiving guidance from the commission to make sure it's providing the services that are desired. And I appreciate Elizabeth and Melanie and Barbara, your comments that this process will begin with the negotiations, but will remain firmly under the control of and in response to the IRC and its decisions on how to go about this and make sure it's good work done on time in an effective way that provides the outreach and engagement that we need. So with that, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion unless there are any other commissioners interested in offering further comment. Very good. David, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. And as a reminder to the public, the commission's votes are taken in random order. With that, Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Commissioner Serbin. Chair Boehm.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Chair Boehm, that motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you, David. Thank you again, commissioners, for the robust discussion. Thank you, Elizabeth, Melanie, other members of the SSC, as well as Barbara and the rest of the staff. It's all very much appreciated. We'll be hearing more details and discussing more about the way forward as appropriate and merited in the coming days and weeks. The next item on the agenda is item 6, a discussion and possible approval of revisions to IRC bylaws for single point of contact, a rather relevant subject given that we have just issued concurrence with the SSC. This agenda item marks the first and most urgent step in the systemic review and update of our bylaws that we've discussed previously. For what it's worth, while I've contributed to that process, I'm sure fellow commissioners will share my compliments and gratitude to co-vice chairs Garcia and Katerina for their great work to get us to this point. The revisions before the IRC today address the IRC's creation of a single point of contact for each of the contractors. Commissioners should have received a summary of the proposed changes to the bylaws, a summary of those proposed changes to the bylaws, along with the text of suggested bylaws revisions in the agenda package for today's meeting. I want to note that today's agenda actually includes 2 items about bylaws. The current item that we're discussing, agenda item 6, is solely aimed at the changes to address issues related to the single point of contact in the bylaws. I'll ask commissioners respectfully to hold any questions on other bylaws issues not related to the single point of contact until our next agenda item, item 7. But before we hear from members of the public in considering any potential action, I'd like to invite commissioners to ask any clarifying questions they have on the single point of contact and on the materials that you received with the agenda package. Are there any clarifying questions regarding what we're dealing with right now? Commissioner Inman.
Yes, thank you. So I see the changes here. Are these word by word the same as what was approved when we talked about single point of contact last time? And if they aren't, I guess, how does it differ?
I believe the text is, if not verbatim, very, very close, but let me turn to Co-Vice Chair Caterina Garcia just to confirm that.
Oh, hi, thanks Commissioner Inman and thanks Chair Boehm. The meat of the changes are exactly the same. However, there is a section that was omitted. We have already approved the specific duties of the single point of contact. But rather than list them all in the bylaws, it seemed more appropriate, they're already in the record, to just state for the record that the chair, that the commission will establish the duties of the single point of contact, because as we have additional contractors, we may have additional single points of contact and they may have slightly different duties. So that was the rationale behind omitting that section and just making it a very blanket statement saying the commission will establish the duties. Does that?
So there, yeah, I believe so. And so just to put a dot on it, there's no additional authority being granted to the single point of contact beyond what was originally granted, I guess, in the document.
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A really good point to bring out. Any other additional clarification questions? Very good. So I'll ask David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. None in advance of today's meeting, but if anyone would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. I don't see any requests to speak, so that concludes public comment on this item, Chair Boehm.
Thank you very much, David. So to discuss this item, we will need a motion. And I'll ask for a motion to approve, there you have it on the screen, the revisions to the IRC bylaws for single point of contact as included in the agenda materials.
I'll move that.
Okay, I apologize because I don't have a view of a screen. I'm sorry, who moved for it?
I moved there.
Commissioner Russ, thank you very much. Second.
Second.
Commissioner Brown, thank you very much. Any discussion? I have Co-Vice Chair Garcia, then Commissioner Inman, then Commissioner Diaz. Co-Vice Chair Garcia, please.
I just wanted to point out, because I think it's worth mentioning, that there is a sentence in the bylaws that states that a single point of contact communications with a service provider do not require disclosure pursuant to Article 2, Section 7 of the bylaws. In other words, they do not have to be reported as ex parte communications, which I believe makes sense. I think it would be utterly cumbersome and not unnecessary. But I do think it's important to point that out.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Inman.
Potentially, this is a clarifying question, but so who has the authority to decide that we need a single point of contact? Is it the chair's authority? Or is it the IRC's authority?
To establish a single point of contact?
Yeah.
Yeah. Co-Vice Chair Katerina, did you want to say something on that?
Yes, so the change in the bylaws says that that this is one of the duties of the chair, and the chair may appoint a single point of contact for each commission service provider.
Okay. Okay. Is there good Chair? Are you going to establish one for the outreach, or is that something we should discuss now or later? I don't know.
No. I'm glad you brought it up. We are in the process of designating one. I'm working with staff to reach that conclusion as quickly as possible. But for a variety of reasons, it seemed best not to announce anything today. But my anticipation and plan is that we will have one to be named at our next meeting.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's not what this says. It says the commission will do it. You'll appoint, the chair will appoint, but it's the commission who will establish. But I think
that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I should have clarified it. So the position, as I understand it, and again, co-vice chairs, please correct me if I'm wrong, the position itself is something that the IRC creates. The appointment of the specific individual is something that the chair does. Do I have that right? Yes. Good. Okay, so Commissioner Dostal, thank you. And Commissioner Inman as well. Commissioner Inman, was there anything else on that? So Commissioner Diaz, and then I don't have anyone else, so we would move right to a vote. Very good. So Commissioner Diaz, please.
Just a clarification here. I know that there was also two things going on. So that there's a clarification of the vice chair's roles as a coordinating responsibilities. And then the other is, well, any recommendation that comes from the point of contact, for example, I mean, they can't decide solely on their own what to do. They always have to bring it to the full IRC, but not for every single thing, just, you know, setting up meetings or things with our service providers. That's very clear to me. I guess my question is, should we add, is there a need to add the additional duties of the vice chairpersons as part of this motion as well? If that's, because it says to perform coordinating functions regarding the single point of contact for each service provider. So I didn't know what that meant.
So do you want me to, so yeah, there was some discussion in some of the ad hoc committee meetings. What happens if there's a problem with between the single point of contact and the service provider? What does the single point of contact do? So in order to kind of lessen the role, lessen the duties of the chair, because the chair does a lot already, we decided that the vice chairs could act as an intermediary. And if it needs to be elevated to the chair or the full IRC, then that occurs. But for communicating problems and making us aware of any potential problems, that was kind of the thought behind adding those duties in that manner. I don't anticipate that we're going to ever be involved, because we're all professionals and we have professional consultants working with us. But I think it's always good to be prepared for, if something does happen, what is the chain, what is the process that the single point of contact needs to follow.
Commissioner Diaz, anything else on that?
No, that's all. Thanks.
Good. All right. Last call for comments before we move to a vote on the motion. Good. With that in mind, this being the motion as previously read and seen on the screen regarding the amendments to the bylaws regarding the single point of contact, David, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Commissioner Diaz?
Aye.
Chair Boehm?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Serbin. Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Commissioner Katerina.
Aye.
Chair Boehm, that motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you, David. Thank you, commissioners. And just to reconfirm, not only are we keeping the point of contact powers consistent with what had already been approved, but I promise you, as chair and working with the co-vice chairs, we'll make sure the process is very smooth and that the full commission will be able to execute its oversight and supervisory duties whenever needed. The key to this is going to be what's going on between meetings, but in this system and with these changes to the bylaws, I'm confident we'll have a very good system in place. With that, we move on to item 7, a discussion, and only a discussion, of other possible revisions to IRC bylaws. As I mentioned, commissioners have indicated a strong and quite appropriate interest in a systemic review and update of the IRC bylaws. Again, the co-vice chairs and I have been working on that review. Having just addressed the more immediate issue of single point of contact, we now, in this agenda item, wanted to take advantage of the opportunity for commissioners to discuss other bylaws changes that they may want to consider or that may be desirable. I'm looking forward to hear the thoughts and suggestions of fellow commissioners, both today and in the coming days and weeks. But I'd like first to get the discussion started to give Co-Vice Chair Katerina an opportunity to summarize the work she, Co-Vice Chair Garcia, and I have been doing and our thoughts thus far. Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I wanted to start out, ideally, we would have liked to cover all of these changes in one meeting, but given how much other important things needed to be conducted in this meeting, we thought it would be relevant to divide it up into 2 sections. So we obviously had dealt with the single point of contact first, and then wanted to talk now in this item about other potential changes and kind of maybe walk you through some of the things we're considering. So I'll start out with some general statements. This is a general restructuring, as David said, of the bylaws, and it is hopefully designed, and you will see it as we put it together for our next meeting, to reflect a more structured format of the bylaws. So right now, our bylaws are pretty broad, if you will. And we want to give a little bit more structure into each of those sections so that when you have to look up a single point of contact, you can see it more easily than having to read through, many paragraphs to get to the issue you're looking for. We also are looking at adding some clarifying languages, again, because our bylaws are so broad. We want to fine tune those so that in each individual situation, we give the commissioners some guidelines. So our bylaws are the rules. They govern the rules from how we operate as a commission. And so looking at what we started with, which are very acceptable bylaws, we're now looking at creating something a little bit more structured and specific. So, and I'll walk you through article by article, and then we can talk, then if you want to ask questions about what we're thinking about, we can address that. So the first article that we have right now is called the purpose and authority. And we felt that it would be important to divide these 2 sections. So have article 1 be our purpose, and article 2 would be our authority. And we would add some clarifying language to the authority so that our roles and our purpose are clearly defined in separate sections. So we thought perhaps in article, so that's article 1 and 2. We thought article 3, which is currently article 2 on the commissioners, is adding a section on the qualifications. So these come from the law, but we thought it was important to communicate what the qualifications that each of us are expected to have in some form or another. And there's also some additional qualifying language that would go in the section that describes the role of the commissioner. We added an Article 4 called Powers and Duties, and we added 6 sections which will detail the power and duties of the commissioners. There is, of course, a general section, a section on prohibition. So what can't we do? We cannot talk to our, for example, our supervisors about the maps. That's one thing we know we can't do. There's also a section that details the public records, what our public hearings are going to look like, what our plan is, and again, and then a discussion on our service providers. And none of this is specific. We are making them more clear, but they will not be a laundry list. It's more of a here is the structure for these sections. We have now added, of course, the section on the single point of contact to the officers and staff. And we've added clarifying language to the officers, the duties of the chair, the duties of the vice chair, what happens in an officer vacancy, what is the role of the clerk, and what is the role of our staff. And again, these are descriptive, descriptive sentences. Article 6 is basically information on our meetings. And so we have added some clarifying language to the following sections on the Brown Act, what is a quorum, the voting, the rules of order, regular commission meetings, schedule, agenda posting, and public comments. We added 2 new sections, which are called on special meetings and committees, because as you may recall, we did not have those defined in our original bylaws, but they are certainly things that are important to describe in a way in more detail. And then we added clarifying language to any additional provisions section. And we also added an other section to that. So I think that is my general statement. I'm happy to entertain any questions. I think I should throw it back to you, Chair Boehm. Do we need to hear public comment first, or where do we go from here?
Thank you for that. I think we'll wait on public comment and even wait on clarifying questions for a moment, because I would like to give Co-Vice Chair Garcia a chance to add any comments or thoughts she wanted to add.
No, I think Amy did a great job of providing a sort of a broad outline of what we've been doing on the bylaws. I think the important point to make is that the bylaws need to provide guidance to the commission. That's where we would look to understand how we're supposed to do something, but they also need to be flexible. And that's the way that we've been looking at the bylaws, is not just what works for us, but providing a document that will work for commissions in the next redistricting process. Not a document that would just be so specific and so prescriptive that it would handcuff some future commission.
Very good, thank you for that. So let me ask for clarifying questions first. Then we'll hear for any comments from the public, and then we'll have a discussion focusing on any reactions to what Co-Vice Chair Katerina just presented, and much more importantly, any ideas or topics or suggestions or issues that commissioners want to raise. So for clarifying questions, let me take Commissioner Pons, Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Dostal. Commissioner Pons, please.
Okay, thank you. Great work by the ad hoc committee. I mean, this is a heavy lift, but I have a couple of questions, if I may. Because the bylaws have already been established and posted, I would imagine that anything that we would change would have to be justified when those changes are made and being made available for review to the public. It's about justification. And as you were explaining what you were doing and why you were doing it, you use the word structure a lot, the format, structure. But some of the comments went way beyond just structuring, right? There were a lot of adding and subtracting. And so anytime you change bylaws, as we already know, there has to be some reason why. Either something was wrong, unclear, or ambiguous. So, or ambiguous. So just something for us to think about as we move forward, because you know, these are bylaws and they are binding, and we just need to be ready to explain to the public why we changed the bylaws. Thank you.
And if I may, Chair Boehm, Commissioner Pons, thank you for those comments. And I probably should have said this in my closing, so I apologize. What we will do for the next meeting is have a similar document to the single point of contact. So you will see a list in very same structure that says, here's what we changed, a summary of the changes. And then you will have a document of the new bylaw, the existing bylaws with the changes marked up, same as before. And you're right, Commissioner Pons, there are a lot of changes. There is some general organizational structure that was done, but also most of the changes which we looked at in a very broad way, we talked about clarifying. So we have very broad bylaws, and we're just providing additional information on certain topics. And so, and I know it's hard because you can't see those, but when you see the package at the next, for the next agenda, you'll see what I mean, and you'll be able to actually see, okay, here's what was added or what was changed or moved or subtracted.
And if I might also add, you make a very good point, Commissioner Pons. It's not so much change that we're doing. There are some revisions to the bylaws, which happen, you know, that's not an unusual thing for an organization to, you know, update or revise their bylaws. But a lot of actually what we've done is fill in the gaps, because what we have is a very rudimentary set of bylaws. And there are a lot of really sort of yawning gaps in our bylaws where it is not clear who has the authority to make a decision or act on how does this happen? Who does it? What? And the bylaws is not the place where we set out procedures. That will be in other places. But how, you know, who does it? Who has the authority? That's a lot of what we're doing with the bylaws, is filling in the gaps. And the bylaws, because there has never been an IRC in the County of San Diego, it was very hard to understand all of the things that might need to go in the bylaws. And so now, after 6 or 7 months, we can see some of the gaps. And I think even, you know, the next commission, or even at the end of this, we might find that we need to do yet another bylaws revision. So I think that it will make a lot of sense. Whether or not how we're addressing some of these gaps are acceptable to everybody is another question. But I think we've identified some of those gaps, and we're trying to fill in those gaps in the bylaws.
Thank you. There's no doubt in my mind that everything that's being done will be helpful and healthy. It's not the what in my mind, it's the why that needs to be explained to the public, because the public has access to the document because it's hung on the website. And so people read our work and they know the body of work. And so they would want to know, why did you do this? And so we need to just anticipate the question. And as you put out the what we did, the puts and the takes, you know, in this document that you're proposing, another section or column that says, this is why it was done, either for clarification or to expand or to sort of bring in and limit the roles and responsibilities of what the commission can do, you know, just like that, you know, just anticipating the potential questions so we can move past this, although it's very important, and really be ready for the body of work that we were commissioned to do. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I have Commissioner Inman, then Commissioner Dustal. Again, we're in clarifying questions, but as always, I want to stay out of the way of a useful conversation. So Commissioner Inman, please.
Yes, thank you. And again, I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I know it's taking a lot of time and effort. My question was about looking at other independent commissions that are doing similar things. are you looking to other commissions and looking at their bylaws, and are they changing their bylaws, or is that part of this process of coming up with the changes that we need? You know, because there's also a bunch of other folks that are out there looking at the same thing. So I guess that was my question. Are we looking outside ourselves also to do this?
Do you want to address that, Commissioner Garcia? Do you want me to? Okay. So yes, Commissioner Inman, we did look at other county commission bylaws changes, and I can tell you that what's interesting is some of the county commissions have not changed their bylaws, and others have. So you know, we know that it is a natural part of a progression, especially for a new organization like this. We also looked at some of the city commissions and the state commission as well. So the state commission, because it already had been in place, had a very robust, and they have a whole document of their processes and structure. But to answer your question, yes, we did look at other commissions, and we did get some good ideas. Some of the other ideas came from the commission itself. Questions that came up: can we do this? Can't we do this? We're trying to get those questions answered as well. So, and I'll mention one for Commissioner Chen, because I know you brought this up about political activity. What can we do and what can't we do? And so obviously we have to work with our legal team to determine how to address that issue to the extent that we can. And so that's just one example of something that we know came from a commissioner, and it was something that is, you know, is possible to be addressed in this document.
Okay, good. Thank you both for that. Commissioner Dostal and then Commissioner Serban.
Thank you. Commissioner Katerina just kind of touched on what I was going to ask about, which is, have you talked to council about it? And it sounds like if you haven't already, you're planning to. So that was just my question. So thank you.
In fact,
if I could, it's okay. I have to tell you all, our council and our staff are doing amazing work. And if you want to think about how busy our council is and staff right now, they're working on getting the demography consultant up and running and negotiating the contract, right? And they're getting the SSC done for the outreach, and they're getting bylaws, you know, text to review on top of everything else they already are doing for us. So I'm you know, just in awe of how much work they are having to do every day. And we would have liked to have given you more information, but it just seemed like too much at that point. So we decided that we would divide it up and give you all time to think about it. And then you'll be able to see the next steps in the next meeting.
And just to add a little bit to that, because it relates to Commissioner Ponce's point on public engagement as well. When we've had a discussion and felt we were in good shape and did some homework on bylaws requirements, such as the single point of contact, we moved that forward. That's why we did it the way we did. There are certainly lots of issues, from social media to political activity to simply the role and responsibilities of co-vice chairs that requires doing some homework. We know where the commission is interested, or at least where we've heard expressions of interest. So we're trying to get the homework done on that, including all the inputs needed from council and staff alongside everything else they're doing. And I know we all share gratitude for them to doing it that way. But again, I'll go into a little more detail when we get to the discussion about how I see this going forward and make sure the commission's comfortable with that. Before we turn to that though, let me offer for final clarifying questions, Commissioner Serban, then we'll ask for public comment, and then we'll have a discussion. Commissioner Serban.
Thank you, Chair Bame. Thanks for recognizing me, and sorry for being tardy to the meeting. So my understanding is we're discussing the single point of contact proposal to the bylaws.
We've passed that.
Oh, are we? Or where are we on the agenda?
Yep. So we're now on to agenda item 7 and discussing, right now we're asking clarifying questions of Co-Vice Chairs Katerina kind of umbrella presentation with no slides.
Oh, I see.
Just
okay.
a quick review of how we're looking at the other bylaws, and we'll have discussion and requests for ideas of that in just a moment.
Oh, okay. Well, then I will withdraw my my question.
Very
then.
good. No, it's okay. No problem at all. Thank you for that. Okay, seeing no other clarifying questions, David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Beam. Not in advance of today's meeting, but if any member of the public who is present would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. And not seeing any requests to speak, that concludes public comment on this item, Chair Beam.
Good, excellent. So we'll move on to discussion. Again, this is an informational item. We're not taking any vote or motion tonight. In fact, my current plan, in coordination with the co-vice chairs, council, and staff, is to present the package of actual text at our next meeting on July 8th. We still would not have a vote at that point because it's going to be a lot of material to digest. And I might point out the agenda for the next meeting of the commission will likely be issued in conjunction with the July 4th holiday. So we're going to need to be very careful to make sure we meet all our Brown Act requirements while at the same time giving commissioners time to read and digest all the materials. But in all likelihood, I think we'll have the overall textual changes that Co-Vice Chair Katerina described. We'll have that to you at our next meeting. We'll have a discussion of that, but we'll wait for an actual vote till the following meeting. Now, if it turns out that each and every commissioner is satisfied, we may, with the presentation and with the changes, we might move to a vote, but that's not my anticipation right now because I think it's going to be relatively complex. I say all that because I'd like to hear from commissioners if you'd be okay with that kind of two-step process that we've used before, where we'll have the presentation of the material at one meeting and then a vote at the following meeting. Let me also point out, though, that after today's meeting and discussion, the co-vice chairs and I will take your feedback, ideas, comments, and we'll finalize a draft with those further edits. As I've indicated, the intention is to give commissioners ample time, and the public, frankly, ample time, for review of any proposed edits, while also continuing the robust discussion that we'll have today. So with that, let me ask if there are any ideas, suggestions, or other comments from commissioners at this time on the issue of bylaws or any specific topics. Commissioner Inman, then Commissioner Dostal.
Yes, thank you. So I assume the schedule that you've outlined, I mean, I agree with the schedule. It gives us time to contemplate and make a deliberate action on this. So I agree with that. I assume that that means that none of the proposed bylaw changes are things that we need to do now. Like, you know, we did do the spot quickly because we were bringing on contractors. So none of the other changes appear to be that pressing that we can take the time to do as you outlined.
And for what it's worth, yes, and I think the co-vice chairs would agree on that. We also want to get it right. In other words, we want to make sure staff and council have had a chance to do a good review of that, to make sure they're comfortable with the language and that they're ready to answer any questions that might come up when the texts are actually presented. So we're trying to create as holistic and smooth a process as possible. Yes, there are certainly some issues that would be good to address immediately, but I think in the case of what we're talking about, we'll need to continue to rely on the commission's good judgment to work under the existing bylaws to make sure we get this right and make as many of the required changes as we need to in the right way with adequate time for discussion and consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dostal and then Commissioner Serban.
Thank you. And thank you all for your work on this. This is really great. And based on the comprehensive review you all are doing, you probably already discussed these, but I just wanted to throw out two very specific changes or clarifications I'd like to see, which is in 2.6, talking about communications with staff. Just to clarify that it's not just the chair that can communicate with staff, but commissioners generally. because right now it just says the chair. And then on, you also mentioned social media, and I would just like more clarification about social media, because that is such a sticky thing. I did post, you know, hey, we did a training, you know, and so it wasn't specifically about an upcoming meeting. So under the strict terms of this, you know, but I didn't talk about what, you know, it's just like, we're having these meetings and I did one, you know, or with these trainings and I did one. So just social media is such a sticky issue that, again, I know it was already on your list, but just wanted to emphasize that that was something I've been thinking about too. Thank you.
No, that's good to hear and appreciate that. And I think it's something that other commissioners have mentioned before, on the contact with staff and frankly on contact with council. I think it needs to be done, it needs to be clarified and expanded a bit. But as Co-Vice Chair Garcia and Co-Vice Chair Caterina said, what we're trying to do here is fill in some gaps, make sure the commission is comfortable with all that, and ideally inform the way we're doing our work so that it works as smoothly as possible. I should add, there's a reason the initial bylaws were as restrictive and as simple as they were, but I share what the co-vice chairs have said. I think what others have said, what you, Commissioner Dostal, just added. I think commissioners at this point have a good sense of how they want to work, and therefore we've got a good sense of what to enshrine in our bylaws to make sure we can do that well. So again, this is not just what any 3, 4, or 5 people are considering. This incorporates, in an ideal way at least, this will incorporate all the experiences and successes and lessons learned that we've had to date, for which I think each and every commissioner deserves both some credit and hold some responsibility to make sure we're enshrining the right way in the bylaws itself. So thank you for that. Commissioner Serban.
Thank you for recognizing me again, Chair Boehm. I'm curious, the single point of contact bylaw revision, was that intended only for the service providers associated with the RFPs, or is that for all service providers that will be providing services under contract to the IRC, including our council, including any other additional legal teams that we might hire, or any other service providers that we end up contracting with? Does the bylaw revision, if it doesn't allow for that, I wonder whether the bylaw committee would be worth considering having a single point of contact for those other service providers as well.
Co-Vice Chair Caterina, Co-Vice Chair Garcia, do you want to comment on that before I take the floor yet again?
I'll just say that yes, we have talked about that. There are a couple things that affect more than one group, let's say, and the single point of contact and the ex parte communication, for example. So in the single point of contact discussion, it does say that they are not required to report any their communications under the ex parte log. So we're probably going to expand that discussion as it relates to the communication for all commissioners and ad hoc committees and so on. So there are some things that got covered just as they relate to the single point of contact. In general, the single point of contact, we have given ourselves the opportunity to appoint to have a single point of contact. It is the chair's job to appoint a single point of contact. We don't have to. And so, we certainly looked at how we're going to identify that language. But I appreciate your comments about looking at council, knowing that we've got some more issues coming up. So I think that's certainly an area where we can take a close look as we look at drafting, finishing up the drafting on this next batch. Does that sound about right, Chair Boehm and Commissioner Garcia?
Well, I'd like to maybe engage a little bit more with Commissioner Serban. So you raise a very important point here, Ramesses, because the bylaws, the way we just amended them, says that the commission shall establish a single point of contact for each service provider. So I believe the intention was, or what we were thinking of at that point, were the service providers that we contracted for, you know, the demography services and outreach services. We actually were not thinking of our council or any future, you know, special counsel as service providers, although technically they are. So to answer your question, the bylaws actually do say that we shall, it doesn't say may. And typically when you want to provide flexibility, you would say may. So then the commission would have the prerogative to say, yes, we'll establish this single point of contact for this contractor, but not for that one. So that may be something we want to revisit. I personally, and again, I'm not the one who makes the decision. We all make these decisions together. I'm not sure of the utility of having a SPOC for our general counsel. I see the utility of having one for these other consultants that we're hiring. But right now, we just adopted some bylaws that indicate that we, you know, unless we define our counsel as not necessarily a service provider. I hate to complicate things, but you started it, Ramesses.
Well, I think just one point of clarification. I think the language actually says may. So it doesn't sound like it's, it says,
I'm looking at it right now on section 5, role of the single point of contact. It says the commission shall establish a single point of contact.
But I thought under Article 3, Section 3, it says may appoint a single point of contact.
Oh, maybe it got changed.
Well, that's with, I think, regard to the chair. Actually, and this is something Commissioner Dostal just raised, the chair actually naming the single point of contact. So in other words, the commission shall establish the office, if you will. And that's now a principle for service providers. Now, I think we should probably go back to council and make sure we have an explicit answer on which kind of counsel and how counsel counts or doesn't count as a service provider within that context. But once the commission is doing that, since it is going to do that, at least with the defined service providers, the 2 RFP contract awardees, that it will fall to the chair to have the authority, meaning may here, has permission to actually name a single point of contact. So the may applies to the chair's authority to name someone. The shall applies to the commission. Should we, for instance, need another demographer due to some change in state or federal law, then the clause in Article 3, Section 5 would kick in. But you raise a very important question, Commissioner Serban. What does that mean for both current and even more future counsel along the lines of what we discussed in previous weeks? And we'll need to take a good look at that and make sure to discuss it. I'd rather have that discussion once we have a text in front of us and have the considered advice of our existing counsel on it, so we have something concrete to discuss. But I'm glad you brought it up today, and we'll make sure to address it in our next meeting.
Yeah, I guess it's not so much just like limited to council, but I mean, I'm reading the proposed change, the proposed change, and I'm wondering to myself, okay, well, what falls within the definition of a service provider that now triggers a duty within us to establish this office?
Yeah, and I think we need to have a good solid answer on that and make sure the rest of the bylaws are clear on that. So we'll make sure to have a discussion on that. Thank you for raising it. Any other questions, comments, suggestions, areas of focus? And again, I promise we're looking back at minutes and detailed notes, and at least in my case, occasionally reviewing the video of the actual meetings to try to make sure we're addressing all the things that have been discussed before. So hopefully it'll be holistic, but again, my intent is still to give commissioners time to consider it and think about it. We'll have an introductory discussion and first discussion, ideally at our next meeting. I think we're on track for that. And then ideally a follow-on discussion and vote at the meeting after that, the meeting in late July. Okay. So with that, I'm going to get ready to close up this item unless there are any last comments or questions or issues to highlight. Very good. So we move on to agenda item 8, the introduction, presentation, and some training from the IRC's demographic services contractor, who've been very patient in waiting their turn on an evening meeting, and it's appreciated. You'll recall that at our last meeting, based on results of the SSC's competitive procurement and recommendation, the IRC concurred with the decision to move forward with Flow Analytics to fill that role on the demographic services contractor role. Since that time, the county's contract with Flow Analytics has been executed, I'm happy to say. So I'm sure commissioners will join me in welcoming the opportunity tonight to meet with the Flow Analytics team and learn more about the IRC's demographer. At this time, I'd like to welcome Tyler Vick, the principal in charge and managing director at Flow Analytics, where he has managed the firm's planning, GIS, and data analytics services for more than 15 years. He has broad experience designing and implementing complex data-driven projects, including successful management of more than 300 projects, you thought we were busy, for school districts, local, state, and federal governments, public utilities, ports, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and tribes. His specialty is providing vision, strategic planning, and implementation strategies for Flow's most complex projects for both private and municipal clients. He's experienced in leading and working on diverse teams and enjoys the opportunity to collaborate with clients to solve complex technical challenges. Mr. Vick and your team, welcome. I'll leave it to you to introduce the other members of the team, but give you the floor with a warm welcome again, please.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate it. Our presentation's up there. First of all, I just want to say thank you. The company's very excited and feel very privileged for the opportunity to work with you on this important project for the county. As David said, I'm the managing director of Flow and principal in charge on this project. I've been with Flow for a little over 16 years in total, and in coming to you from Portland, Oregon. Although for what it's worth, I was born and raised in the Central Valley of California in Visalia. With that, I'll hand it over to the rest of the team members to introduce themselves as well.
Thanks, Tyler. My name is Jed Roberts. I also am based out of Portland, Oregon. I'm a senior GIS analyst and project manager with over a decade of experience in the public sector and another 2 years with Flow Analytics. I manage several of our higher profile school district and electoral redistricting projects, including a project with Portland Public Schools to balance their enrollment, and Spokane County, Washington's electoral redistricting. I'll be coordinating with county staff and the IRC, a point of contact perhaps, to deliver the technical elements of this project. In the near term, I will be drafting the detailed project schedule and coordinating collection of GIS data to begin building our community database. I just want to say that I'm very pleased to be a part of this redistricting effort and looking forward to delivering a transparent process for the folks of San Diego County. And I also want to introduce Rachel Roberts, who is not with us tonight, but is a key member of our technical team. Rachel is also based out of Portland and has deep experience supporting school districts and has helped develop the technical approach to electoral redistricting that we'll be using here in 2021. And with that, I'm going to pass it to John McKenzie.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Jed, and thanks everybody in the commission for having us. I'm John McKenzie. I'm a senior analyst and the director of business development for Flow Analytics. See on the screen, it says I am based out of Tampa, Florida. Technically, that's incorrect. I'm moving to Tampa in 2 weeks. Right now, I'm in Boston area, where I'm from.
but I will soon be in Tampa. So that's a little ahead of schedule, but I am on the East Coast, so I apologize if I look a little bit more tired than my West Coast colleagues here. But anyway, once again, thanks for having us, and turn it over to Alex.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Brosh. I'm a senior demographer and data analyst with Flow, also based out of our Portland, Oregon office. I have a background in human geography, geographic information systems, and applied social demography. And at Flow, I help lead efforts with our school district clients, primarily preparing student enrollment forecasts and developing tools for enrollment modeling. Now, these are efforts that help school districts make educated, data-driven decisions that influence attendance area boundary changes and their capital facility planning. And I also play an integral role in our electoral redistricting projects, including conducting baseline demographic assessments and developing tools to support the redistricting analysis itself. And one of the components of the demographic assessments is compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And I just wanted to mention that Flow is aware that racially polarized voting analysis is an important consideration for the IRC, and we have coordinated with the IRC Council to initiate the conversations on that topic. So there'll be more to come on that in the future. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and county staff, and thanks for having us here tonight. I'm Kate Elliott. I'm a communications specialist with Mull, Foster & Alonji and Flow Analytics based in our Seattle office. And I've spent the last decade as a public engagement and communications specialist working on some really fun and controversial projects such as highway expansions and roadway tolling implementation. And I'm part of a much bigger communications team at Flow and MFA. And I'm here today because I have familiarity with GIS. I spent some time mapping insect habits for farmers, which was really fun. I'll tell you about it some other time. And recently I've been flexing my project management skills on a variety of interdisciplinary projects at MFA and Flow. So I'll be helping Jed keep this project on track and on budget. And one of the things I hope I can help with in regard to this work is serving as a liaison with the new engagement team. So it was good to hear that discussion earlier about their scope and contract. And I just hope that between my background in community engagement and GIS, I want to ensure that our partners can effectively communicate about the important work that we'll all be doing together. So I look forward to working with you all, and thank you for your time, and I'll pass it back to Tyler.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it. We just wanted to spend a couple minutes just giving you a recap again on who we are as Flow, and you got tidbits of that, of course, through all of us, but we are a GIS and data analytics and planning firm. Our client base are local governments, particularly cities and counties and school districts nationally. We also do work with other special purpose districts, including utility companies and port districts. Over the last 5 years, we've completed 90 redistricting related and demographic analysis projects. And this is both in very small rural communities and very large urban areas like Philadelphia. We are actively working on electoral redistricting projects for other cities and counties in California, Washington, and Georgia. We're also awaiting decisions on dozens of projects in these states and others, and we continue to pursue this. We think it's important work, and we think our experience aligns well with it. One thing I did want to mention is that in addition to this work, over the years, we have supported a number of large environmental litigation projects, including being one of the primary data management and analytical consultants for NOAA during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and for a number of Superfund sites around the country. And I only mention this point out, that we are very conscientious of the importance of proper data management, process documentation, and record keeping in general. And then the last bullet there, we take a very impartial and data-driven approach to all of our work, including redistricting. That's how we do our work. And at the end of the day, what gets us excited to come to work every day is kind of embodied in our mission statement, which is really to improve communities in which we live and work. Slide change. And then I won't stay on here long, but our general approach, again, very analytical. We have experienced population geographers, demographers, GIS analysts, and data scientists, along with community engagement folks. So we keep a very objective mind, but we also keep it very data-driven and procedural. And along with that is part of that process is using the best technology we can, the best data we can, and making sure that it's accessible and transparent to both our clients and the communities in which we work. And then as Kate mentioned as well, since we do have a large community engagement firm, and in a lot of cases, both for school districts and for these other redistricting projects, we are doing the community engagement as well. So we're very aware of how these need to sync up. And I'll just, I'll tag on to what Kate said, that we're very excited to sync up with the engagement firm just as soon as we can. So we're excited for that. And with that, I will hand it back over to Jed.
Thank you, Tyler. And at this point, I believe we're going to launch into our demo of the district scenario modeler. So John, can you just confirm for us that you do have the ability to share your screen? I can confirm for you that you do. I see your screen.
I can share my screen, but apparently I can't unmute. You'd think I'd be used to that by now after the past year and change here. Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our tool, which we call the District Scenario Modeler. Before I get into showing you it, I want to tell you a little bit about the background and sort of how this thing came about. So, when a while back, we were looking at tools that are on the market that other groups are using to do redistricting and to allow the public to do redistricting and to draw their own maps. And we felt like a lot of the tools out there maybe weren't the most user-friendly. We as GIS folks and data folks, we do a lot of work of designing tools specifically for public use. And we fully understand the difference between a tool that is going to be accessible to the public and really a solid GIS tool that somebody will need to do pure spatial analytics. And there's a differentiation between those two things. And so we looked at it and felt like we could look at the software that's out there and design something that maybe would be a little bit easier for the public to use, and also maybe provide a little bit more of a robust tool by looking at software that's already out there and already sort of within our software toolbox. As a company, we sort of pride ourselves on being what we say is software agnostic, which means that we don't subscribe to any one particular software and say that's the software we use or one particular tool. We work with so many different clients who are using different types of tools and softwares. We really feel like it's our duty to sort of understand what that software landscape is and to understand, what about each tool works best. What are the benefits and limitations to each tool that's out there, and to be able to apply the right tool for the right situation. So that's the general approach that we took when putting together this district scenario modeler. And as much as you hear me say that name, the reality of it is it's a combination of three sort of established softwares that are all flexible and which we can bring together to make this sort of one more user-friendly interface. So the front end of it, the interface that you're looking at here, this is built off Tableau software, which is a large software company that's out there and established. A lot of the back end data that is being fed into this tool is being done with another software called Alteryx, which is another long established software. It's a data modeling software. And the third piece to that is Arcgis, and Arcgis Online in particular, which is where we actually transfer the data behind these maps to. And I'll show you that a little bit as well. So this is a little bit different than some of the other tools that are out there. This isn't like you're out of the box. Here's here's your package of software, open it up and there it is. This is something that's a little bit different. It's much more flexible and customizable. We can make pretty quick changes. It's not difficult to make small or even medium-sized changes. So it is designed to be flexible and designed to be customized for each one of our projects. And you'll see how that works a little bit here. With that said, the version I'm going to show you now is a demo. And so the data in here is essentially fake demo data. Everything in here is just done for example purposes, the goal being that I want to be able to show you what the functionality of the tools are. So with that, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. And So once again, this is a city called Brookhaven, Georgia. It's a client that we actually just finished up working with. And so when you look at the tool, it looks like a fairly typical mapping redistricting platform. Across the top here, we've got the total population for the city, the total number of districts, the ideal district population. This is the race and ethnicity information for the city as a whole. And one thing to note here, that data can be swapped out if you need CVAP or other information, anything can go there. It's very easy for us to swap out different fields. Once again, just demo, so I put the sort of basics up here to show that. So that's right across the top. And then down here, you can see we have the map itself, and you can choose between different base maps. So I'm just going to click quickly from a satellite view to a, from a streets view to a satellite view. If it doesn't want to think so long. Well, that's not ideal. There we go. Sorry, it took a little longer than I expected. And just something for you to know there is that those are just two very basic base maps that we put in there. You can put as many base maps as you want. We can customize base maps as well. We use another tool called Mapbox, which allows us to build custom base maps. So if you wanted to accentuate streets or things like that, that's a great way to do that as well. It's another piece to the flexibility is that it's not just satellite and streets. We can add as many base maps as you want. Now the tool does have, well, let's go here quickly. You can see the districts, right? So each district is just noted here. We're looking at the existing districts for this particular city right now. And if you hover over the districts, it's going to give you a pop-up of that race and ethnicity breakdown that you can see in this pie chart. These numbers here are going to show you what the population of the district is, how that deviates from the ideal district population. And you can see that for each of the 4 districts that are in this city. There are a number of features that help you identify specific blocks. And this is to help guide the user as you are drawing your maps. And so I will show you those in one second. But first, I'd like to get back to the translation. So I just have a few translated languages in here right now, once again, demo purposes, but we can translate this into as many languages as necessary, and it works throughout the tool. So all aspects of the tool will be translated when we do that. You simply select from the drop-down menu here, and each piece of this the dashboard is going to be translated with the exception of the sort of proper nouns here, which are, in this case, names of communities of interest and neighborhoods. And so, you know, full disclosure, I have just popped in terms out of Google Translate for the demo. We would use actual terms, and we have a translation company that we work with to populate the correct terms, but I just want to demonstrate that, you know, we can handle any language. The tool has that ability. So a couple of other features that I want to quickly show you over here is when you are looking to draw your maps and you're trying to draw the maps based upon, you're going to figure out your population balance and you're trying to figure out what you need to do. We have things such as highlighting the blocks by different population categories, so you can quickly identify those. We have, this is set to race and ethnicity. This could also be set to CVAP or any other field that, you know, we were requested to be brought in that we wanted to do that for. I'll just quickly give an example. So when I select a value here, and then if I go, I can enter the % of the population, and that's going to very quickly filter to the area of the city and the blocks that have a population that is Hispanic or Latino that's greater than 50%. And this works in conjunction with up here, the population category blocks, so you can identify those as well. And once again, these are all sort of designed to guide the user to help them draw the districts that they're trying to draw. I'm just going to go and zero that out. And so down below, and this is something that I think is another piece that's unique to a lot of the tools is we're able to bring in as much community of interest data as we can. as much as out there. There's not really a limit to that. So when we're talking at the county, we can bring in sort of the very standard data that we already have access to, such as city and town limits, things like that. But we can also bring in information when we collect community of interest testimony. We can bring that into this tool as well. So just in this case, the city gave us a few different categories of communities of interest. I'm just going to show you a couple here. One is what they called their city character areas, and the other is their neighborhoods. And those are all listed here, just in this list here. And as I hover over each of these, it's just going to quickly, highlight that particular neighborhood. And then when you hover on the, the green check mark indicates that that district has been preserved, that neighborhood or character area has been preserved in a single district. The X means that it's not. And when you hover over it, it will show you the breakdown of how that specific community is split across districts. If I click on that X again, it's going to filter the map, take me right to it so I can investigate it further. Click it again, and it will go back. So the last window that I'll show you here before I show you how to actually draw stuff, which is probably what you want to see, is this selection preview. This is just a window that's going to basically, this is all going to match everything up here right now because it's just showing you what's in the window. But when you start to draw stuff, and you'll see, why don't I just do it? So when you go to draw new boundaries, the first thing I have to do is click this button. So you click the draw new boundaries button. And once you do that, in this case, it's going to default to, it's completely blank. As we get started, this will default to the existing boundaries. That's typically where we default to and as the starting point, but we can have any starting point. We just got to program it in there. But so right now it's empty. So it's going to give you this where everything is now unassigned. So if I wanted to go and draw some boundaries, I would very quickly choose one of my tools. I'm going to use this lasso selection. And if I wanted to, I'm just going to make this simple for me. And I'm going to just grab all of these blocks here. Well, whatever. Grab as many blocks as I can. I'm going to add these blocks now to District 1. And when I do that, it's going to perform all the calculations. It's going to show me what the breakdown is for District 1. I'm going to split this now and let's do District 2. And one thing that you'll notice is that when I add blocks to District 2, it's not going to add blocks that are already in District 1. So you don't have to be completely precise. It's only going to add those ones I selected that hadn't already been assigned into District 2. Let's grab some more. We'll make a District 3. And then if I wanted to say, oh, I don't like that District 3, I want to get rid of these from this, I just do the same thing. And then instead of saying add, I say remove. And it's going to, once again, move them to the unassigned category, redo all the calculations, and there you go. So another thing here, if I were to simply do this selection, I don't know if you noticed it, but when I do this in the preview, it's going to tell you what's selected here in this preview. So you can do that to test whether or not you actually want to assign those blocks to the district or not, and you can choose to clear it. The other thing is it shows you, which communities of interest have you captured, and are they now going to be all included in the same district or not? So now that's the tool and how to draw it from a high level. One thing that's not in here is some videos, instructional videos. It's something we're putting together. So there will be tutorials for people because I always say, it'd be great if we could just put out a tool for this that was completely intuitive and the public could just open it up and know how to do it. But if you're going to do this well, you're going to have to watch a 3 to 5 minute instructional video. I'm sorry, that's just kind of like the caveat to it. You sort of have to do that. But we try to make it as simple as possible, but still giving all the functionality that you need to make these viable districts. But now the other piece here that we're really happy about and we think is great is that we have some, we don't just want these maps because we really take the position of whatever maps we get, they have value, even if they don't meet the criteria as a valid map according to population balance or something else. Somebody took the time to draw that map. So there's something important about that map to them, and we want to be able to capture that. And so what we did, and this is actually where ArcGIS Online comes in, is this is a survey that we're using. This is an ArcGIS Online based survey. And it allows you to, once you've drawn your map here, to come in and you can state your name. So I'll say that. And I'm not going to put that out to the public, even though I'm moving, but I'll still just write in those letters. And then you can say what you want. I'll say this, you know, this map is awesome. A few exclamation points. And then you can, you know, and we can add as many boxes here. We've tried to follow, this is a link to Common Cause, has a template for community of interest testimony that we just put there because they put out great stuff about how to provide good information that we can then take and put into our analysis. So we love it. So that's just a link to that document, and we're happy to add whatever links to whatever documents to help guide people to provide useful testimony here, whatever we can, we're happy to do that. But once you, you know, fill out your fields and enter your name and you want to submit this, we do ask people to click a button, and it's going to export a little file here. And if you were to select from your, wherever it is, and in this case, this is my downloads, we'll just grab that one. I've done it like 6 times today, making sure I didn't screw it up. But so you put them in there, and then you go ahead and you click submit, and it's going to pop up and say, thanks, you submitted it. You could send another one. The part that we like, because we're data nerds, is that this is sort of behind the scenes in our ArcGIS Online account. And if I refresh this, you're going to see that this is 10:28 p.m. my time, and that's the record that I just submitted. Now, if I have this form view checked, I think that's right, and I do this, I have my data right here, and you know, you'll see it's exactly the same thing, but it's going to give me the list of the districts that were there, as well as the ID for those particular blocks, which once we have it in our ArcGIS Online system, we're tapping into that with our backend tools, which is our Alteryx tool. So we're tapping into that. We'll probably run it on a daily basis where we're pulling all these files, tapping into that data, and then we're processing that, putting it into the information, and it's going to be immediately tied to the person's name, you know, where they live, everything that they said about their community, about the map they drew. It's going to be right there for us to really make streamline the data management and make sure that everything's in alignment. There's no, you know, manual effort where we're trying to match up who sent us what. It's all going to come in right there and be in those records, and it's, you know, in our account so we can see it. So that's the main piece of the tool. I do want to show you the other aspects to it, which we refer to it as another module. I don't know why, but it is, I guess. It's really another dashboard, another way to view this. It works on the exact same functionality, but for community of interest testimony, when people don't want to draw a district map, but they want to draw a map of their community and show where that is. This is the community builder module, and I haven't been there for a while, so I got to reload it here. What you can do is, once again, you have a choice of base maps, and you have an option to submit your testimony. If you want to draw your community, you could zoom in and say, I'm just going to get these, grab these blocks here, say that's my neighborhood or my community that I want to preserve. And as soon as I do that, it's going to pop up. It's going to pop up. Okay, well, I'm just going to do that and make it that one because it's giving me problems, and I'm going to blame that on being very late here. Anyway, I apologize. So anyway, once you do that and you create the community, what you will see is that you have created your community, and it's going to allow you to do the same thing. I can export that data, and it will do the exact same thing, and you can upload it just like we did before, and we get that community of interest testimony and for the blocks, and understand where those locations are added. And, you know, same thing with the other side of this tool that I showed you. This is totally flexible. So we can add in pieces, we can take pieces away, we can change the language, we can change the format, depending on the shape of things. You know, like in some cases, like this city is very vertical. So we had to design it with a vertical window. it's not the case. Some counties are square or rectangular, and that can really change the aspect for user functionality. And with a standard software, it can be really hard to sort of change that layout. But this is really easy to go in and make those changes. So we did want it to have that flexibility, and we want you to know that there is that flexibility, because we don't want to get crazy, but we can go in and make modifications that we think are going to help us get the best information possible, from the community, and to make it easy for you as well to start working with this. So with that, I think that's my demo. And I can turn it back over to Jed, I think, who's gonna sort of lead the show or lead us out.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. And I did want to do a time check with Chair Boehm. I know we had talked about some Q&A.
Right, and thank you for that. Let me first just offer thanks. This is amazing stuff. And frankly, my only quibble is that you ignored my need for 3 to 5 hour videos. John, 3 to 5 minutes for the rest of the commission is great. But seriously, thanks very much for all that. Thanks for the presentation and great introductions. Before we go any farther, I want to make sure you all have had a chance to meet and see Commissioner Ken Inman, who is the single point of contact for Flow Analytics and for the Demographer Services Point. I know you'll enjoy working with him as much as I know all of us are going to enjoy working with you. Before I open the floor for clarifying questions and discussion, let me first ask David if there are members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item, and then we'll have the more fulsome discussion with commissioners. David, any requests?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. None in advance of today's meeting, but if any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, you're welcome to do so. Please raise a virtual hand by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom, or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. And not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on this item, Chair Boehm.
Okay. Thanks very much. So Tyler, Jed, John, team, if I think you've already seen how we tend to operate, I'll just keep a running list of commissioners who either want to ask questions or offer comments. For the purposes of this discussion, I think it'll be easiest if we just lump all that together. So I will focus on keeping a list, and I have Commissioner Krugliak, Commissioner Chen, Commissioner Inman. I was expecting him. That'll get us off to a start, and we'll go from there. So Commissioner Krugliak, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. This is super exciting. I just have a couple of little technical questions that I'll probably get to one bigger question. So the first one is, why make people download what presumably you're already tracking on the back end just to upload it back to you? Is there just a way to push submit for what's already there rather than making them go through that step, especially if they're on like a device where download is difficult?
Yeah, so honestly, it's there's some, because we're using a few different tools and we're going from Tableau to ArcGIS Online, there's a bit of a disconnect. And quite frankly, there may be other ways to have a submit button. However, I believe at this point, having them download and then put it up there, although it's a little bit cumbersome for sure, it's the safest way to know that we actually, that we captured their data and that we have everything. And that is one of the downsides, I guess, to not having it be completely within one. When we looked at, we figured it was a somewhat smaller downside because it should be fairly easy. What I will say is the tool is compatible with other devices, but for people who are, hopefully people aren't going to try to draw maps on the phone. Some people will, but it's difficult no matter what you're doing to draw maps on the phone. But it will work fine with a tablet and other things like that. But I totally understand your concern, and it's something that we can continue to try to work on and see if we can come up with a better solution. But this seemed like the best one right now.
Got it. Related, so you track everything that they choose to upload, and obviously that can be at a person's discretion. Do you also track IP addresses so that you don't just get 10 of the exact same maps with potentially very they could put up different information, different identifying information, or just put up no information. And the back end, we're able to say, actually, this is all coming from the same person. We're not going to weight it 10 times more than any other map that comes in.
That's a really good question. To be perfectly honest, I hadn't thought about that. I think that's something we would be able to do. I would consult with our Chief Technology Officer to figure out the best way to do that. Tyler, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but I feel like that's something that would be right up Grant's alley and he could handle for us.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think that's something when you talk to Grant Herbert, who's our technology, director of technology, and he's a developer and programmer. That's something we'll talk to him about and make sure that we can get in it. And then to your previous question too, I totally understand that point, and I think that's something that we should revisit as well. Part of this is we want to do everything we can to make it as easy as possible for people to use this tool and submit their maps.
And then I'm almost done. The percent of population, you showed us 50 to 100, and to my mind, that means half of the population. So I'm kind of confused as how it picked one set of districts as opposed to presumably the other half of districts is exactly the same if it would also have 50% of the population. So I feel like I'm just not understanding that feature very well, unless there's something cumulative about the districts themselves.
That was showing blocks where 50% of the population were of Hispanic or Latino origin. So it was showing, so you're filtering by percent of the population. That,
okay.
Got it? Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so that only makes sense in a community of interest application.
Yes. Yep. And once again, that could be for other applications. It could be CVAP that we put in there. And there, once again, those fields can be as needed. They can go in, they can come out.
Understood. Okay, and then the last one. So I guess these would all be just basically like user requirements. And I just got kicked off, but hopefully you can still hear me. These would all just be basically user requirements or user asks. What's the process by which we can just kind of send user requirements to you? Is it the process that we would go through Ken, and Ken has a point of contact with one of your program managers or FSEs?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. I apologize.
And I can take it. I think I got it.
Okay.
I can take that one. Yeah, I think that's something that for those that aren't able to or can't or don't want to use the tool, what's the other mechanism for folks to provide communities of interest or maps? And I think that's something, Ken, that we'd want to work with you to decide how that's going to get. We have a whole team of GIS analysts and stuff that can also put these together. One of the other things we did recognize is that there may be some folks who want to have a community of interest or draw a map, but they don't want to have to actually draw it. They just want to do it on the back of their napkin and take a picture of it, and submit that. And so that's something we've acknowledged as well.
So that's actually great, but it's not my question. I'm sorry that I dropped out for a second. It was more like the IP question, the download question. Those are just kind of like software requirements, basically. And so is the process for us submitting user requests or software requirements to Flow, is the process that we would just send a list of requested requirements over to Ken, and then Ken communicates with the right point person on your side?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for all that. Very useful. Commissioner Chen.
You mentioned that the translation stuff was not uploaded and stuff yet. So is the tool not ready to go quite yet? And when do you think it will be then?
So the tool is ready to go, but we do have to do translation for all the required languages. And that does take some time. I think for us, we really want to, before we figure out exactly what timelines are for to be putting this out publicly, we want to have that meeting with the communications team and the communications firm. But we can get those languages, the additional languages, loaded fairly quickly within a couple weeks' time. And at that point, it would be ready to deploy publicly. But no, we don't. I mean, we also don't have all the data. Obviously, we're waiting for the census data put in there too. But no, the languages are something that we have to put in the translations for. So we do that for any language that we need. So that's not something that's, once again, that's not out of the box. That's something that we program in there.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Commissioner Inman, then Commissioner Serban, then Commissioner DeStahl. Commissioner Inman.
Yes, thank you. Excellent presentation, excellent live software demo. It really came off well. I know those things can glitch up on you, so very impressive. And I'm very much looking forward to working with you. Sorry that timing just didn't work out here. I was in a situation where I had no internet access until late last night, early this morning, and so I'm just back. But definitely looking forward to setting up some time to meet with you and working on this process going forward. So thank you very much for your time, and look forward to meeting all of you and working on the project. Thanks a lot. So that's all.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Commissioner Serban.
Hello. Thank you, Chair Barron, for recognizing me, and thank you to Flo for the excellent presentation and the obvious time and all the work that you put into it. My question is with regard to the translation of the mapping tool into different languages. You've mentioned that there is a plan, it sounds like, to translate the tool into the required languages. And I'm really happy to hear that. And thank you for planning to do that. If there is an additional language request, is that possible? And like, how long would it take?
Yeah, that is possible. Like I said, it can handle any language. Our process for the tool is that we do have, we have a translation company that we've done a lot of work with through our school district stuff. And we always, when we're putting something out publicly, want them to review and provide the translation into the terms that we need. And then we have to sort of code those into our calculations that are populating the values that are in here, the text values anyway. So that does take some time. It's not a ton of time, but I hate putting timelines on these things. But I mean, if we had a request and we're gonna, and we're authorized to go ahead and do it, it's the type of thing we could probably turn around within a week. Don't hold me to 1 week exactly, but I'm just trying to give you a ballpark range. It's not something that takes a ton of time, but it's not something we can say, okay, it's not like we click a button and there it is either.
So is the assessment of whether additional languages aside from the required languages, assessing whether it would be needed to have additional translations, is that something that Flo will determine?
I don't think so, but maybe we would work with the council and the community engagement to get their feedback on that. I don't think we would make the decision that, okay, we would want to be directed that we should be adding that, adding that language in.
Like how would you, or I guess, would there be a mechanism by which you would be able to assess whether people are asking for other languages or if there's a need for other accessibility types?
I guess, once again, I want to defer to the communications group to maybe help with gathering that information as part of their work. One of the things I do hope that's in part why we really want to sit down with them as soon as we possibly can, because we do think it's going to be important that they are familiar with this tool and can communicate about the tool to get this type of information. So that is something that we would want to get from them. And we can certainly, I think that's something we could ask them to do, is to find out, is this meeting the needs of the community and the community groups that you're meeting with? And if it's not, we want to know about that and see what we can do to make sure that we make the necessary changes.
Have you ever had any feedback from those who might have like visual impairment and would need like high contrast colors or like larger print? And are you able to accommodate that?
Yes, we can. I will say that all the colors that you see there are designed for colorblind safe, with colorblind safe palettes. And we are very familiar with having different visual requirements for different tools and projects. So that is also something that can be accommodated. And yeah, so I mean, once again, it's flexible. So we can change all of those things. It's not a ton of work. And so those things we can make accommodations.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I have Commissioner Dostal, then Commissioner Pons, then Commissioner Brown. Commissioner
Thank
Dostal,
you.
please.
I have a couple of questions. The first is on timing. You mentioned we need to put the data in. You just mean the current San Diego data, right? We're not waiting for the new census data. People can start using this tool once we have just San Diego County in, right?
Well, so I guess, you know, our position on this is we think we could put out with the current, once we put in the San Diego County new census geography blocks that are available without the attributes, then they could use the community builder module to draw their own communities. We would not want to put out the district tool with other data because we think that would be confusing when we then swap it out with the data. So we wouldn't want to release that until we do have the full, you know, it's the legacy format census data, but until we have the real data that people will be able to know that what they're drawing is, you know, using the actual data. But yes, we can deploy the community builder module sooner by just loading in the San Diego County geographies.
Great, thank you. And my second question was about the question that I guess they thought was asked but wasn't, but actually was my question about what about people who don't have a computer? And if you could just clarify a little bit more, you're going to have, you know, paper maps that people can draw in, and you're going to, you also mentioned they could take a picture, they could just draw it themselves. Could you just clarify that?
Yeah. Go ahead, I was going to say, I think we do need to set up the channels for exactly what are the logistics of receiving those. That needs to be something that needs to be discussed and can be done and will be done. What I will say is we can transform any type of data into a map. That's sort of our specialty in a lot of ways. We can handle anything, and we're prepared to do that for whatever comes in. But the logistics still need to be worked out. How will we receive that those things? And but we will digitize them. We will put our analysts to work digitizing them, turning them into digital maps so that they can enter sort of our data stream where we do all of our number crunching and all that good stuff.
Great, thank you.
Just to add on to that too, on the flip side, if there's you know PDF versions of maps, baseline maps, communities of interest that we also want to make accessible beyond the tool, that's something being GIS and map makers by default, we can also put together and provide in form of map books to help those that are maybe a bit more old fashioned and would like to print those off and draw on them. We can certainly do that as well.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner Pons, then Commissioner Brown.
Yes, thank you. A very interesting and insightful presentation. My question goes a little bit beyond population data and demographics. This goes toward infrastructure, resource, access to those type of things. And so I know, you know, this is a snapshot in time, and 10 years from now, infrastructure, city planners are doing things that we can't even envision. But I know they are being developed right now. So my question to my fellow commissioners is that something we should be thinking about? Is that information that the city commissioners and the city planners can share with the demographers so that we can say, you know, in 10 years, there would be infrastructure where you live that will impact your quality of life. And we've thought about that. So I'm anticipating the question because I know it's one vote, one voice, and we're trying to make sure that those voices and votes count. But this is also about quality of life. And so is that something we should consider? And if so, is that GIS data that the city planners are using, can it be integrated and nested into your programs?
You want to take that?
Well, I can take the last part, which is that if I, you know, my guess is that council may, the outside council may need to lean in on using data or, you know, any sort of predictive data when we're talking about I know that the law requires looking at the census specifically. But the second part of that question, I'm going to defer the hard part, the first part, and just answer the second part, which is that we can take any data. So, and we regularly work with planning data, infrastructure data all the time. So we can handle that, but whether or not we should handle that, I'm going to leave to council and other folks.
Absolutely. I mean, part of my question also went to my fellow commissioners, but it was like, is this a what if, what next thing we should consider as we starting to develop these maps to make sure that we do take into not just voting interest, but also access, education, economic and all those other things that impact the quality of life of the residents? And that's a question for us to think about. It's not a question for you to answer because you're bringing in data and you're making sense of it all. But I just want to make sure as commissioners, we're bringing in all of the data, the right data, and thinking beyond the pale of just the voting impact. Thank you.
If I can just say something about that. I mean, in 10 years, there's going to be a new census. So we're not really, we shouldn't be looking at 10 years in the future. So I think I would agree that, we should talk to council and make sure it's very clear what we should be considering and what we should not be considering. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some legality associated with that question. And that's why it's something that we should definitely talk to council about. It's just a consideration. It's not a concern right now, but I do think it should be a consideration. This is a snapshot in time, and 10 years from now, people may decide to stay where they are just because of what's happening within that area. It's just a thought, consideration, not a concern. Thank you.
Okay, very good on that. Thank you. So I have Commissioner Brown. Then I think Commissioner Serban might want to say one more thing. And then with the commission's permission, we'll start to wrap this up because we still have some other items to do, even though, again, I think this is tremendously useful and much appreciate the interest in the comments. So Commissioner Brown.
Okay, I think I just have one quick question for you. When the public goes to access this draw your map type of program, is it something that they're going to go on to our website to access it, or will they have an app for their phones that they need to download, or combination of those?
Yeah, no, great question. It can be, it's embedded, so it can go pretty much anywhere. So it can go on your website. We have been, in some cases, launching our own sites just to host it, but it's designed to be able to go anywhere. And so wherever we want to put it, we can put it, yeah.
Okay. And then all the information from it comes back to you.
Comes back to us and
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to us. It comes into our system, our tool Alteryx, which is we love because it documents automatically every single thing that happens with that data as soon as it enters into our system. And it keeps it there it's excellent for record keeping. And of course, then it'll all go back out to the public too. So they'll all see what's been coming in.
And also any security issues with that, or? No,
that's one of another nice piece to us, as I say, it's our district scenario model, but it's built on top of 3 very well established softwares, is that we're working with software that, works with very sensitive data in all sorts of industries. So it allows us a sense of security knowing that it's falling under those sort of protections.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Serban.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I think just to refine or maybe add on to Commissioner Pons's comment or question, I think the question to council is whether it's appropriate to consider projected future population growth in determining our proposed maps, or are we only to use the 2020 data? And then another sort of related question is, can we consider what we might project as changes in the non-census data, like anticipated shifts in communities of interest? If we anticipate that changing over the decade or over the next 10 years, is that a thing that we can consider? I think maybe that's partly what Commissioner Pons was asking, and I think it's worth asking council to weigh in on that.
Marguerite or Hillary, do you want to briefly weigh in on that now?
Or we can ask them, you know, to chime in on that at the next meeting when they need a little bit of time to respond.
Yeah, that, and I'm sure Commissioner Inman can follow up a bit. I do, Marguerite's there. I will offer just one quick thought. What we are empowered to do or not do is still separate from what the communities of interest and their representatives and their members themselves may say. So it is an interesting and important question to be thinking about what we may hear and how we might respond. Marguerite, sorry, I didn't mean to anticipate.
Yeah, no, I was having trouble getting turned on. I was paying attention to the question. I must say, Commissioner Serban, that, and this is just a general statement. It's not a statement or an interpretation with regard to what the commission is required to do. But I have been in redistrictings where between the census and the time of redistricting, there were people living in an area that were not reflected in the census. And we surely took account of that population, although not in the census, by manipulating the deviations. And there may be circumstances where that is appropriate, but we also need to take consideration of that under a law that says you must use the census as adjusted. So we need to weigh and balance them and look at the circumstances. But I do understand your question, and I'm happy to provide the legal authorities that are available on that.
Good. So thanks for that. Thanks, John, for weighing in. Thank you, Commissioners Pons and Serban, for highlighting that issue.
Thank you, Council.
And not seeing any other questions or comments, I do want to give Barbara a quick opportunity to just review how all this relates to a current process, and then we'll move on. So I'll beg Tyler and the team to stay on for just one more moment. Barbara.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I appreciate it. A lot of great conversations around our two RFP or two contractors. And so I wanted just to quickly talk about the contractor, Asian Pacific Association, San Diego, that was just approved by this commission. Quickly on the timeline, the notice of award will actually go out tomorrow. Friday, June 25th. If all goes well, the earliest the contract would be able to be executed would be next Friday, July 2nd. So in terms of the timeline, and then how that connects with this presentation, a lot of those discussions around the opportunities for both of these contractors to work together. Clearly our ad hocs that were working on this knew that from the beginning it was going to be critical. It was going to be super important. The discussion here is also reflective of that. So following tonight's meeting, Flow's next steps are going to be to develop that project timeline and milestones, work with the outreach and engagement contractor to plan for that community engagement, develop the mapping and COI tool for the IRC and public. All of this, of course, working very closely with Commissioner Inman, our single point of contact, and the county core, preparing for that final redistricting from the state, and then just working on those administrative pieces, which I think go to some of the questions that came up today. The process for invoicing, when are their requests, working closely with our council. So I just wanted to update you on both of those items, and thank you, Chair Boehm.
Thank you. Thanks, commissioners. And again, thanks and welcome to Flow Analytics. We appreciate the time you've taken. John, I'll single you out. I have done the bi-coastal thing for evening meetings, and I really, really appreciate the time and the energy you put into it. Obviously, as Barbara just summarized, but as the Flow team has told us, there's a lot more to be done, some of it in a very short time frame, but I think we've heard exactly the kind of commitment and assurances we need. I think we'll be looking to the entire team, including point of contact Inman, maybe I'll start using as a title. But this will take all of us working together. So again, we look forward, Flow Analytics, to drawing on all your services and commitments to help us succeed. Welcome again to the team.
Great, and thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being available. Okay, with that, we now move on to agenda item 9, discussion and possible approval of a tentative schedule of public hearings. I had prepared some fairly extensive remarks on this, but I'm going to try to shrink it down so that we can get to the heart of it. But let me note that my intent, at least at this point, is to have this as an action item with a possible vote to approve a tentative schedule. As Barbara just described, and I think as several commissioners have just mentioned, with the amount of work before us, I think coming out of tonight's meeting with a tentative schedule that will be subject to undoubtedly some additional changes and tweaks, but having that tentative schedule might be useful. That said, there are a number of factors to consider before we decide whether to actually go for an approval today. All right, so to frame the discussion, as you all know, we're required by the election code to hold 7 public hearings over a period of no fewer than 30 days before we begin map drawing. At least one of each of those pre-mapping public hearings must be in each supervisorial district. Further, the code also states that pre-mapping public hearings, and I want to quote the code on this, shall be scheduled at various times and days of the week to accommodate a variety of work schedules and to reach as large an audience as possible. Those are legal requirements. Okay. We all know the public hearings are an important opportunity to hear from the public about communities of interest and related issues that are so critical to shaping our work. The hearings will make us, the IRC, available to hear the many and varied voices in the region. I expect that the vast majority of our time in these meetings will be taking up with listening and collecting useful information, with the IRC really needing to provide itself only a brief introductory presentation and occasional clarifying questions. So the item before us today and the schedule that you have in your agenda package is intended to start the conversation about how to schedule those required and valuable pre-mapping public hearings. You have 2 potential options described here. As you can imagine, setting the dates as described here was not simple as just looking at the calendar. There are legal requirements, not just those I described, but the Brown Act noticing and other timing and logistical considerations. We also need to take full advantage of the public outreach and engagement services contractor, which we are now moving forward on to make sure they're involved in taking advantage of this. And of course, we'll continue to need and rely on staff and council to help us move forward. So we're going to need the public outreach and engagement services contractor to finalize some of the meeting dates, times, and other details as outlined in the statement of work. But as Barbara just said, we're not really there yet in the sense that now that we have IRC concurrence, we enter the contract execution phase that hopefully will be done, but almost certainly will have to take to roughly July 2nd, which means we'll have our introductory section, and I'll look to Barbara to make sure I'm stating this correctly, at our next meeting on July 8th. Okay. So that'll be our first opportunity to really engage with them, although certainly they'll be following this and I think aware of it. It's also worth bearing in mind that the next meeting after July 8th of the full IRC is currently scheduled for July 22nd at 5:30 p.m. That would be the earliest opportunity for the IRC to consider the contractor's public outreach plan if it's available, including the final dates for pre-mapping public hearings. There's some notes included in the attached document that you have about the anticipated time available for the contractor's efforts and what kind of time pressure they're going to face between meeting us on July 8th and the contract execution just before that, and a meeting if it was to be held on July 22nd. So if I might, I'm going to turn first to potential dates B, the second box, because frankly, with the slightly later start, but the same concluding date, I have a feeling that's where we may need to go. So let me describe that scenario first, and then we can kind of dive into potential dates A if we need to. Under potential dates B, there's some additional time for the contractor to develop their plan for pre-mapping public hearings, conduct outreach, and as we just heard, in all likelihood, coordinate a bit with Flow Analytics. Right now, that would probably mean considering, although we wouldn't vote on this tonight, moving the July 22nd regular meeting to July 29th. That may not be such an issue as it might otherwise be, because between July 22nd and our next meeting on August 12th is a 3-week break, similar to the one we've talked about before. It just happens occasionally when one meeting is close to the end of the month, the following Thursday, appropriate Thursday for a full meeting, is actually 3 weeks away. So in effect, what we would be doing under potential dates B, again, we won't vote on this part tonight, but we would anticipate it, would be moving the 3-week break from the July-August period to the July 8th to 29th period. And for a whole lot of reasons, not least the bylaws consideration we just discussed, that may be a more appropriate time for a 3-week session break between regular meetings. Under that scenario, the contractor would have 9 business days to develop a draft plan for pre-mapping public hearings before the regular IRC meeting on the 29th, but after the meeting introduction with us on July 8th. That sequence is based on Brown Act noticing requirements and the necessary time for staff and council to review and prepare agenda items. The contractor also would have 9 business days for outreach and promotion to the community between our rescheduled regular meeting on July 29th and the first public hearing, which under potential date B sequence would be on Thursday, August 12th, probably in conjunction with our scheduled meeting. Now, again, there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered, not the least of which is the possibility and practicality of whether at that point in August, we will be continuing to have meetings virtually or in person or in some sort of hybrid format. Staff is working very hard on those considerations, but again, I think it may be advantageous, even though we don't know the answers to those or all the factors related to that yet, it may be advantageous tonight to at least approve a tentative calendar for the public hearings that would happen in the pre-mapping phase. I hope all that is relatively clear. I'm going to give you a moment to digest that, and if it's okay, move right now to see if there are any members of the public who want to speak on this agenda item. David, are there any members of the public who have expressed interest so far?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. There have been no members of the public who requested to address this item in advance. If anyone present would like to address the Commission, we'd welcome your comments. Please raise a virtual hand. I would like to note that one of your e-comments, specifically that of David Holtzman, was specific to this item. That comment was posted online and distributed to the commissioners. And I'm not seeing any requests to speak, so that concludes public comment on this item.
Very good. So at this point, I'll ask for clarifying questions with the idea that if we're moving that direction or if a commissioner is so interested, we may take up a motion. My current intent, but it's very much subject to the interest of the commission, would be to move for a motion to approve potential dates B, with the understanding that we would leave the rescheduling of the IRC meeting to a separate agenda item at our next meeting. That's to be in compliance with Brown Act requirements and other requirements. So for right now, let me ask that we begin with clarifying questions as well as related comments. And if you have a feeling one way or the other, whether you'd be interested in approving at least a tentative schedule along the lines of potential dates B. Commissioner Serban, please.
Oh, so thank you, Chair Boehm. So why does option B, I see that it has a hearing date on September 2nd, but option A doesn't. If we did option A, could option A fit another hearing on September 2nd if we wanted to?
It's certainly possible. I think the challenge with that, and Barbara, I'll ask you to step in here, but I think option A keeps a fairly decent break between most of the meetings, although in the August sequence, it's still a little tight. In potential date B, we are facing a little bit more of an ambitious schedule. And I should point out, for public hearings, and after Barbara, I'll ask council to confirm this, they are still meetings of the IRC and therefore require a quorum. So in these pre-mapping public hearings, no matter what schedule we eventually adopt, we're going to need 9 commissioners at each of these meetings. Now we can talk about, and I'd rather do this frankly at our next meeting, how to share the burden, if you will, because it does get rather ambitious. We are trying to match it in one format or another with the dates of the regular meetings, whether the public hearing is conducted as a specific agenda item at a specific time within the regular meeting, or something like we did in the RFP process, where we might have a session earlier that constitutes the public hearing and then have the regular meeting. But either way, I think we certainly could add a September 2nd meeting to option A if we wanted to. There is some room, although it gets a little tight, to add another to option B. But I also think there may be advantage in using the 7 hearings under option B, under potential dates B, that would give some more time to prepare the way and make sure those public hearings are designed for maximum effectiveness and efficiency. But let me turn to Barbara and then Council for any other comments related to that. Barbara?
Yes, thank you, Chair Boehm. So a couple consideration for the September 2nd date is the holiday. And so there are sometimes mixed, responses from community. On the potential dates B, that was put in there just in an attempt to try to get all those dates in there, but it is something to consider whether or not you either get less or more of the public engagement. And then I'll defer to Council on explaining the, because it's a very important point in terms of the quorum and the connection to our regular scheduled meetings.
Marguerite, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, there I am. There I am. Yeah. There's no, I think Barbara's comment is the right one. It's a practical one. There's no reason that September 2nd could not be added to the option A scenario. There's no reason another hearing can't be added to option B. The requirement is that they be noticed 7 days ahead of time. And so there are ways to accomplish that with having meetings relatively close together, and we can make recommendations on that. Also, you want to give enough time between meetings for your consultants to be able to be responsive to the public and to you, and also for the public to be able to submit their proposals. So some amount of time between meetings is healthy, but there's no legal reason why you can't schedule an extra one.
Commissioner Serban, I want to give you a chance to add to that if you like, and then I have Commissioner Co-Vice Chair Garcia and then Commissioner Inman. Commissioner Serban?
If we did B, would it make sense to consider keeping the regular meeting on the 22nd? Because would we want to review and assess or approve the contractor's public hearing plan?
I think, and Barbara, again, I want to confirm, the challenge would be whether the contractor would have enough time to really develop the plan to present either on the 22nd, or if we follow the option as described in potential date A, even on the 21st. Barbara, do you want to offer any thoughts on that?
Correct. You're correct, Chair Boehm. So looking back, I'm looking at the schedule. You have the tentative hearings. As I mentioned, the contract would be signed the soonest would be on the beginning of July. We're going to introduce them on July 8th, but they're not able to take any action until after they sign the contract. So that only gives them a couple of days. They'll meet all of you and then they can start developing that plan. So they would only have 4 business days to develop a draft plan for public hearing after meeting you all. So that was the consideration or the challenge we ran into with, which is why there's 2 potential set of dates.
Okay, good. Thanks. So it's important. And again, none of this is set in stone. And if we need to think about it more, if that's the will of the commission, we will. Again, my hope would be to approve a tentative schedule tonight, but we can think that through and talk about it as we go. So I have Co-Vice Chair Garcia, Commissioner Inman, and then Commissioner Brown. Rosette, please.
Thanks. So I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure that Marguerite clarified for me the necessity of a quorum. We're absolutely sure that that we need 9 commissioners at each of these meetings. That's question number 1. My other question, I think what Ramesses was trying to get at was, we're required to have 7 public hearings, but might we want to do more? I mean, we're now kind of, we have a constrained timeline here, so maybe 7 is the best we can do, but I think maybe that's what he was trying to get at there. And I think that there is, if we were to go with the A schedule, we could add in that September 2nd date. But I will say that I am concerned at the September, the proposed September schedule for the B schedule. I mean, it's 4 meetings in a row, 4 weeks in a row. And that September 2nd date is right around Labor Day. And I'm wondering why, and maybe Ken, you can speak to this. The earliest we can adopt a map, I think, is something like October 14th. If I remember correctly, I'd have to go back and look, something like that. So I'm wondering if there wouldn't be a possibility of allowing one of these meeting dates to happen in early October, because the last September meeting and the first October meeting, there are 3 weeks between those 2 meetings. So we have a little bit of breathing room there, and that might just make September not look quite so demanding. So I don't know. I kind of like starting a little bit earlier, although I think it will be hard for the contractor. I think Ramesses is right. We need to actually see the plan and approve the plan from the contractor. And the earliest we can do that would be either July 22nd or July 29th. When I look at the calendar, if they sign the contract on July 2nd, that means they can start working the following week. And so they wouldn't have anything for our first meeting in July 8th, but they could potentially, according to their own timeline that I'm looking at, they say that in week 1, they'll do certain things, but by week 2, they say they will create a schedule and invite and coordinate outreach and schedules with community-based organizations. That's what they say they're going to accomplish in week 2. So there's a possibility that they could have a plan for us to approve on July 22nd or July 29th. Those are my.
May I clarify, Chair Boehm, on the July 2nd date? So the contract, assuming all goes well and they sign it on July 2nd, Commissioner Garcia, then we run into Monday, the holiday, and the Brown Act in terms of being able to put any material into the packet for the July 8th meeting. It's for your consideration and approval. So the July 8th would actually be the first time that you'll meet them, right. And they can do the presentation, and then we fall. And so then July 22nd being sort of when they can, engage with you all. And Marguerite, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was sort of the challenge with the dates of the signature and the packet, agenda packet.
Yeah, that's right.
I agree with that. I wasn't questioning that. I see that as exactly the way that would happen. The 8th is when we meet them, and the subsequent July meeting is when they show us their schedule, their proposed schedule. Yeah.
And Chair Boehm, if I may respond to Commissioner Garcia's question. Commissioner Garcia, the language of the statute is that the commission shall conduct at least 7 public hearings, and the commission is a quorum of the commissioners. However, it doesn't say that if there are additional workshops, additional abilities and vehicles that the commission schedules to take in public input, that all of that has to be by the commission. You have to do the 7. But if there are in-between workshops, I think that they can be scheduled without a quorum, as long as you meet this statutory requirement. And I'm sorry if I misunderstood Commissioner Serban's question on that. But this 7, let's, is the commission a quorum?
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's partly on me as well, because I am focused on meeting those legal requirements.
Right.
I do want to point out something Marguerite just mentioned. If we were to go with option A and wanted a meeting on July 29th, because of the special noticing requirements for public hearings, we would have to shift the meeting scheduled for July 22nd of the regular IRC to July 21st. The only reason that's important, but it's important, is that shrinks the window even more for the contractor to provide the plan and to do any coordination that's needed. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just trying to balance the different factors and make sure the commission is fully aware. I'm going to ask
just real quickly, Chair. Couldn't the 29th? Oh no, I'm sorry. You're right.
We could move the 29th theoretically, but yeah, you know the complexities therein. So we've got some options though. It could be a workshop, for instance. There are some things to be done. Commissioner Inman, I'm going to call on you, but I'm also going to ask you to address the point Co-Vice Chair Garcia, I think, raised quite accurately. Do we need to wrap up by September 23rd, given what will happen with data being released and when we would want to have the maps starting to be issued? Because we got to have those 7 full hearings before we can issue any maps. And I had asked staff to prepare this calendar with the release of data in mind, but it's a perfectly reasonable question. Could we let it slip a little bit longer and not have too much impact from your view as POC for demographer services?
Sure. So thank you, and I'll hopefully Marguerite will check me on these things, these dates as well. But I think that as the timeline stands right now, right, we haven't changed the deadline. Right now, we're still facing that December 15th deadline for map adoption. So nothing's changed about that. Given that scenario, on the table that we were looking at, September 27 is the first day that we can release draft maps under the current deadline. If we move the map adoption deadline out to January 15, then that date actually moves to October 11. And there's actually more. We go from, what is it, that 7-day to the 60-day waiting period after release of data is what happens. So there's, there's a bunch of kind of triggers that occur. So right now, October 11, if we get the change to map adoption to December or to January 15, then the first date that we could release draft maps would be October 11. Now, with these public hearings, I mean, my view would be we want to go into this with a really solid plan. And so I would prefer to give people sufficient time to develop that. So that means I would prefer to start the public hearings after we've had more time, push it to August for the first set of public hearings. We also want to make sure that when we finish public hearings, I do think it's prudent not to immediately rush out with a map, because then the people in the last public hearing are going to say, well, wait a minute, how could you have had time to assimilate what we provided in the maps you're releasing? So, even though right now, if we get no extension, September 27 being the first day, we would not want to start releasing maps at that point in time. We haven't finished public hearings. And I think you need to have a pause so that we can direct the demographers appropriately based on the public input that we've had. And so I don't see us doing anything under either deadline in releasing maps until mid-October, if not, well, until mid-October. I don't see how we can provide direction to the demographer to create the maps that we want to release. Now, we can be directing them to produce maps. You know, I mean, we don't want to sit idle. So we can be working, but we want to make sure that we've assimilated all the information that we've collected and had sufficient time to do that. So those are the scenarios in my maps. And I don't, Marguerite, if I got my dates wrong, please correct me.
And no, Commissioner Inman, I agree with your dates, of course, which are dependent on the delivery of the data from the statewide database. But it appears that we're going to have, under one scenario, a waiting period of 1 week. But if we get an extension of the deadline, we'll have a waiting period of 3 weeks. So yeah, I agree with you.
And I did have a question.
And I wanted to make sure you had a chance to actually ask what you wanted to ask, please, or make a point.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, this goes back to the issue of quorum and meetings, and maybe we're going to cover this, but at a later point. If so, that's fine. But again, I'm just trying to figure out, when we shift to having meetings in person, can we still, if we can't be there in person, have a virtual attendance to these meetings? Or if you're going to cover that later and the ground rules for all that, that's fine. But I guess that's something that I'm unclear about.
Yeah, I think staff may have something to say on that. Let me just say that we're at an interim period now where we can have hybrid meetings. But even under the Brown Act, there's an ability to have somebody in remote, but it's much more limited. So and of course, Hillary can track me on this too, but we will, I know staff is working very hard right now on we're actually required to have in-person meetings if we can. But how to structure those, I know staff is working very hard on that now.
And
Barbara, there's guidance both from the governor and in the current Brown Act on that.
And Barbara, I'm going to leave it to you whether you want to address that now or not. I am perfectly comfortable saying staff is working very hard on it. I will point out again, if we are doing in-person meetings, even with a hybrid component, we are going to have to do 5 meetings in the 5 districts. So commissioners need to keep in mind, whatever calendar we adopt, if there's an in-person piece, and we won't have the in-person decision today, I'm hopeful we'll have a good bit of more information on July 8th, but keep in mind that period in August and September where we're doing these public hearings are going to include some mobility. Now, some of that will help some of us because the meeting will be that much closer to where you live, but some of it may require some additional travel. And if the more meetings or workshops we do, as Marguerite and Rosette both mentioned, the more that in-person question becomes really, really relevant. I'm hoping for maximum flexibility on this because I think we and the public are still going to be dealing with the aftermath of COVID, as it were. And some of this, without meaning to steal Jack Russ's thunder again, is going to be related to what's going on in the legislative world. So a lot to think about and consider. Again, all the more reason, and I don't have particularly strong feelings about scenario B. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to look for the maximum efficiency and flexibility for commissioners, and to a slightly lesser extent, our contractors, to let them do the work they need to do. But I'm perfectly happy for us to go one way or the other. I think, though, it may be easier to work from a more concrete set of dates from here on in that we can adjust rather than having to keep reinventing. Just some initial thoughts. All right, I've got Commissioner Brown, who's been extremely patient yet again. Go ahead, please.
I just have one question. How long is a public meeting? Does it have to be a certain amount of time, or?
I will defer to council and staff on this, but I think it's as long as the public wants to speak.
You don't even need me, David. That's correct.
Okay. So
you've got to start on time, but there's no end date.
Commissioner Brown, it's important, and we'll obviously have time limits and all that. But we also need to bear in mind, it is possible that we could have a public hearing especially when they're happening this regularly under either schedule, where we might only have 1 or 2 speakers. But we have the legal requirement. We have the legal requirement to hold 7 public hearings before mapping, and we have that legal requirement to include a meeting in each district, however that's defined by in-person. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's a really important question. Barbara, did you want to add anything to that part of the conversation?
Oh, you're correct. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Any other thoughts or comments? Commissioner Servin.
In reading the language of the statute, it it requires that we hold meetings in each supervisorial district. How's that going to work if we're like doing these remote meetings?
I think, and again, I'll look to staff and council to confirm, it'll be a little like the educational tour. We will designate a virtual meeting for District 1 on date whatever. We will designate a virtual meeting for District 2. And I think the real key to that, and I think Co-Vice Chair Garcia hinted at it, is not going to be what we designate. It's going to be how active the outreach contractor can be in getting the right people notified of that meeting and see if we can activate the network to get the right kind of inputs for that meeting devoted to that district. So I don't know that we would need to be restrictive. I think it would still be a public meeting, but I think we would probably want to be looking at a plan that included how are we going to get proactively as much participation as possible. Let me just ask staff and council or other commissioners, am I missing anything in that?
And sorry, so just to follow up, since there's 5 districts and we have 7 dates, what are the extra 2? What are we doing with those extra 2?
Legal requirement for 7 public hearings.
Oh, are we designating those extra 2 as something, or is that like a meaning to say like
they can just be countywide?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, I think if we had a specific request or there was a need for a specific focus, we'd certainly want to find a way to notice that and to provide advance notice that would be part of the effect for that meeting. But yeah, I think it would just be general. Marguerite, would that fulfill the legal requirement?
Yeah, but there's also a requirement in the law that came in at the beginning of this year that we do, to the extent we can, provide an opportunity for in-person participation. The law even has some suggestions for that. And now that the executive, restrictions are off, what the county is doing and what our staff is doing is figuring out what that looks like. Because if we're going to have meetings in 5 supervisorial districts, and there is going to be an in-person component, there needs to be a room that is properly equipped, that can accommodate the public, can do the recordings that we need, can accommodate the audio visit. It's a big lift. It's not something you say, okay, let's just go to the gym in the school district. Doesn't work that way.
There's translation.
Yes.
There's a number of questions. And the real conundrum is going to be when somebody raises their hand and says, you can't have an in-person district because you're putting my health at risk and I want to participate. That's why we have counsel, Marguerite, right? So, okay. Commissioner Russ, is that a hand or are you? Yeah, okay. So any thoughts or comments on whether we try to approve a tentative schedule, any motion? And I'll leave it open because I don't have a good sense. Commissioner Dostal?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move to approve tentative dates, potential dates B.
Okay.
Second.
Good. Second by Commissioner Brown. We'll turn to discussion on that. Good. And while I warn my 10-year-old who just won his semifinal baseball playoff game that you all are interested, but he doesn't need to yell about it too much. Let me just give you one moment to think about things. I'll be right back. Thank you. Last request for comment discussion, and then we'll go to a vote. The advantages of an evening meeting. Very good. David, could you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Begin with Chair Boehm.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz. Is Commissioner Diaz here?
She had to leave, I believe.
Okay. Commissioner Dostal.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Katarina.
Aye.
Commissioner Serbin.
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak. Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye. That one work.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Boehm. That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Very good. And commissioners, thank you very much. I promise you this will remain subject to adjustment as needed. And if you have thoughts, please be in touch with staff. Barbara, any closing comments on the item? Very good. Marguerite, I'm assuming not. Very good. So we'll now turn to agenda item 10, the monthly budget update, which this month will include review of the additional funding that was approved by the Board of Supervisors on June 8th, thanks to some really excellent procedural work behind the scenes. Barbara, Nicole, and team, thank you. Again, this is an informational item for the commission with no action specifically needed. And again, after staff remarks, we'll hear from any public speakers, and then commissioners will have an opportunity for clarifying questions and comments. With that, Nicole, please go ahead. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Boehm. I'll keep this brief. Tonight, I'll highlight the activity since the last monthly budget update. First, let's look at the changes to the line item budget from the Board of Supervisors approval of additional funds of $467,500 on June 8th. The IRC budget line items have been revised to incorporate the revenue increase and other changes recommended by the Budget Ad Hoc Committee and approved by the IRC on May 13th. For monthly activity, just under $70,000 has been spent, with projected spending of more than $101,000, leaving the IRC with more than $1 million remaining from the board's increased allocation of just over $1.2 million. All expenditures over the past month were anticipated. The largest projected expenditure of about $150,000 is for the contracted services of external counsel through the May invoice, which is included in tonight's agenda materials. Next, expenditures for IT equipment include monthly charges from the county's IT contractor for commissioner laptops, network access, and email addresses. Projected amounts include the estimated monthly charges through June. Moving to the IT other category, this includes the monthly charges for the Zoom service hosting the commission's virtual meetings through June. The most recent Zoom invoice is included in the agenda materials. For translation and interpretation, actual and projected expenditures of more than $11,000 are for translation of agendas up to the IRC meeting of May 27th and other website content based on the translation requirements of the California Elections Code. The actual year-to-date amount includes paid invoices from January through April and a small surcharge for recovery of countywide costs. The projected amount includes the estimated charges for May, as that invoice was not received at the time of agenda posting. We will include that invoice next month for the IRC to review. Staff continues to review and validate invoices on an ongoing basis and reconcile with charges in Oracle monthly and at fiscal year end, which is coming up. This concludes the monthly budget status update for ongoing transparency and accountability over the use of public funds. Subject to your questions, I'll now turn back to Chairman Bay.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Really appreciate it. Let me turn first to David. Are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
No requests in advance of the meeting, Chair Boehm. If any member of the public who is present would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak. That concludes public comment on this item, Chair Bam.
Thank you very much for that. And I will interject here. There are members of the public still with us. It's much appreciated. I don't say it after every agenda item, but I should. Thank you for being here. Are there any clarifying questions or comments from commissioners on the monthly budget update? Very good. So again, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Barbara and team. We now move on to agenda item 11, an opportunity for the Commission's remaining ad hoc committees to provide updates. In keeping with our usual procedures, we'll hear comments from the public after the initial presentation, and then hear any clarifying questions or comments from commissioners. I'll again ask commissioners to keep their questions or comments brief, bearing in mind that as usual on this item, there's no specific action to be taken. Our first update will be from the Ad Hoc Committee on Redistricting, Outreach, and Communication, created to develop recommendations on an outreach and communication plan prior to the onboarding of a public outreach and engagement contractor and before census data is available. I stress that a little bit because this will be one of the last times you will hear from this ad hoc committee. For that update, including a review of the ongoing education tour and if we're so inclined, some of the other events we know are coming up in our schedule, I will turn to Co-Vice Chair Rosick Garcia, please.
I'm looking forward to this being the last, if not the penultimate, if not the ultimate presentation. I'll go through this really quickly. Go ahead on to the next slide. We are almost done with our virtual education tour. 4 out of 5 of them have been completed. District 2, Ken Inman and Jack Russ is next week. And you can see there the number of RSVPs and attendees. Yeah, it's a pretty good response. Jack and Russ look like they're pretty popular so far with their RSVPs. Next slide. And I was very impressed by this. The staff put this together, and we've had pretty, I would say, pretty impressive attendance by a variety of organizations around the county, including the LGBT Community Center, Universidad del Popular, Blue Shield of California Promise Health Plan. I mean, just a Fallbrook Chamber of Commerce, a variety. So that's really good. Next slide. This is just the number of RSVPs and then the actual attendance. And it's not unusual for people to sign up to do something virtually and then decide when the time comes that they don't really feel like getting on a Zoom call again. But nevertheless, I think we've had some pretty good attendance. The takeaways, District 1 had a higher number of residents from outside their districts RSVP and attend their sessions. And maybe that's because of the Spanish translation, I don't know. Districts 3, 4, and 5 had a higher number of residents from within their districts RSVP and attend their sessions. And we don't have any information on District 2 yet because they haven't done theirs till next week. Next slide. I think this looks just very quickly, we did that polling at the beginning and at the end, and you can see that the audience moved significantly, I would say, into the higher numbers when they were asked, how much do you know? They from the beginning to the end, they had learned quite a bit more. And also many of our audience members came to the presentations already believing redistricting to be important. But even in that case, we still had movement where people after our presentation thought it was even more important. Oh yeah, there we go. Start of the webinar, end of the webinar. Next slide. The takeaways here are that the virtual education tours increased attendees' knowledge on redistricting and also on their understanding of the importance of redistricting, I would say. And is that, we have one more slide? Same thing, next slide. These are some of the comments we received. Just general appreciation for the presentations. I think they were pretty well received by the people who came and attended. And what I don't know, and we don't have to have an answer tonight, but I'm curious to know if we know if people have come and watched the presentation that's been posted online, or have we not actually, or have people come and watched any of the videos I think that we posted online? That would be an interesting bit of information. And then before, I just wanted to mention that we actually have 3 more events coming up. There is Commissioner Diaz is going to be presenting to the Oak Park Community Council meeting in another week or so. Commissioner Russ is working on a date to present to the Poway Chamber of Commerce. And Amy Katerina and I will be presenting to the LIFE, a group at the Mira Costa Community College. LIFE is stands for Learning is for Everyone. And it's not college students, it's actually funded by their foundation, and it's community members who can attend events that Mira Costa Community College puts on. And they've asked us to present. So we're getting the word out there, and staff have done an excellent job advertising these events on Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, using the county libraries. So even if a lot of people didn't attend, I think a lot of people saw that we have a redistricting commission in the county. And, you know, if they didn't feel like they needed to come to a presentation, they're at least aware of us, and maybe they'll come to, you know, public hearings that we're going to be launching soon. Thank you, Chair Boehm.
Very much for that. David, do we have any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Not in advance of today's meeting. If any member of the public would like to address the commission, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak. That concludes public comment on this item, Chair Boehm.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments from commissioners? Very good. Thank you again, Co-Vice Chair Garcia, and thanks to all the commissioners working on outreach, looking at opportunities. It's just going to get more important. So really appreciate the engagement. Thank you for that. The next update will be from the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. I'm really tempted not to say another word, but I will recall that there are 4 purposes given to this committee, the most active of which remains the 4th one from the list you'll remember that we've mentioned in previous meetings, to report back to the full commission with recommended options for action, including but not limited to actions regarding SB 594. In keeping with my pledge not to steal any more thunder than I have to, I now turn to Commissioner Russ for the update. Please.
Well, thank you, Chair Boehm. Actually, I do think you have some thunder you can add a little later on, right after this, but I want to be quick. At the last meeting, of course, we told the full commission that the Glazier bill, the 594 bill, is not moving forward at this time. However, Glazier staff states that he remains engaged and is looking for other legislative vehicles to provide the relief that 594 could have offered. Also, all San Diego County legislators have been contacted and are aware of the timeline problem and our proposed remedy. We provided timeline schedule demonstrating the minimal effects upon other downstream functions. Tony Atkins is a local legislator and is the president pro tem of the Senate, but her staff was focused on this issue, and we responded to a number of questions, and they indicated that there may be another vehicle or another way to move this forward. We got the same message from Nick Hayden. He's staff director of the Senate Elections and was a Constitutional Amendment Committee. We met with the California-wide Citizens Redistricting Commission and discussed the census delays and the effects on the squeezing of the timeline. They will be taking this issue up at their next meeting on June 30th. They want us to send a letter outlining our position and timeline. Maybe the June 11th letter that you sent, Chair Boehm, to Senator Glazer might be the one to send. We've also caucused with the Los Angeles County Citizens Redistricting Commission and provided them with a copy of our letter. We were informed last Monday by the chair of their ad hoc committee on this issue that a letter has been prepared by them and circulated among the commission members, which would support our January 15th date. They met last night, and I am uncertain as to what results there may have been, because they have not yet posted their recording of last night's meeting. On action items, we want the League of Women Voters and Common Cause to endorse our proposal. I know that they were really looking for something like a January 30th, but perhaps we can convince them that a January 15th is very reasonable for all parties. By the way, there's the ex parte logs that all commissioners have access to give summaries of all this. But Chair Boehm, I understand that you've had some communication with the City of San Diego Redistricting Commission. And I don't want to steal your thunder. You want to tell us about that, sir?
It's not any steal at all. It's simply continuing to build on the good work of the ad hoc committee and the entire commission. The chair of the San Diego City Redistricting Commission has expressed at least agreement in principle to offer support for our approach and get that January 15th timeline or a date extension. And I only just saw the email from him last night, so we'll be having a discussion in the next day or two about how to secure that. It's a I'm sorry, Commissioner Russ.
No, that ends my report. Thank you.
So I just want to express thanks. I mean, this is the way it's supposed to work. By being proactive, by being thoughtful, by thinking through all the different aspects from Commissioner Inman's invaluable chart of what different dates mean for different efforts, to the entire ad hoc committee's efforts to engage all these different legislators, staff, stakeholders, other commissions. It's really outstanding work. And I agree, Jack. Commissioners, please, please, please review the ex parte log. There's a lot of good information on what's going on with this, and I'm sure other commissioners may have some ideas on that. And please work with staff to make sure those are reaching the ad hoc committee. Let me now turn to David and ask if there are any requests from the public to address this item.
There were no requests in advance of today's meeting, but we do now have a request from Mary Thompson. You'll hear that you've been unmuted. Please begin by stating your name for the audio record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the commission.
My name is Mary Thompson, and I'm speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters. It's a question actually for clarification. It was stated that the commission is seeking the League and Common Cause endorsement of the proposal for the January 15th amendment. Just clarification, to whom would that endorsement be, request be made? Would it be to Senator Glazer's office or to Tony Atkins' office? Thank you.
I would think both. Yeah, I would think both.
I should say that if there are any other members of the public who wish to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. And not seeing any further requests to speak, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thanks. And in keeping with our rather difficult rules for this kind of exchange, I will refer to staff with the specific instruction to look at this at that public comment with regard to the ad hoc committee's continuing dialogue with various stakeholders, including the League of Women Voters, to confirm and detail what Commissioner Russ just offered, as well as what other commissioners have said before. But it's a long way of saying I'm sure we can continue the coordination that's been excellent to date and continue to work in a good partnership on these things. Commissioners, any questions, comments, concerns about what you just heard? Very well. Thank you for that. Thanks again to our public comments. Thanks again, commissioners, for your participation in the ad hoc committees and all the work you're doing in that. Thanks again to staff and council for playing such a critical role in making all the contributions that are needed to enable the commissioners to get their work done on all these issues. We now turn to agenda item 12, a discussion of future agenda items for upcoming meetings. Again, this is an informational item with no action proposed for tonight. Commissioner inputs on agenda items are, of course, always welcome, and we'll do all we can to address those concerns effectively and efficiently at an upcoming meeting. The list includes items that have been raised previously and are in the queue, so to speak. Before I open up the floor, let me just offer a few brief comments. A critical focus will remain on public hearings. We've talked a lot about that. I will ask commissioners to be in touch with staff directly for any more specific suggestions, either with regard to the public hearings or with regard to other events, so that we can consider them and bring them together under a future agenda item. On lessons learned, we've been continuing to discuss that. We're thinking through a format. Please, please, please be keeping your notes on that. I'm sure we'll be addressing that in the very near future. Regarding racially polarized voting analysis, it is indeed an element of the demographer's contract, and it, for me at least, was reassuring to hear that as part of the presentation tonight. I'm sure we'll have further discussions and ongoing thoughts about that. Again, I think Commissioner Inman, in his role as point of contact, will have a critical role to play. We also still have on the list for future consideration the potential retention of special counsel, maybe even special counsels. We've talked about that, I think, as part of the discussion tonight. I'd be happy to talk about that more as needed or to hear from commissioners. And again, just as a reminder, staff is looking at the logistics and requirements for in-person or hybrid or continued virtual meetings. And again, I hope we'll have a much more in-depth update on July 8th. Before I turn to commissioners, let me just ask David again, any requests from the public to address this item?
Thank you, Chair Bain. None in advance of today's meeting. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak. That concludes public comment on this item, Chair Bain.
Very good, thank you. I have Commissioner Henson and then Commissioner Servin. Commissioner Henson, please.
Thank you. When we were talking about the SPOC, Commissioner Garcia, you talked about a document that you were looking at that had may and shall in it, and I can't put my finger on that document. Could somebody send that out to those of us that don't have the document at hand so that we can see what you were looking at?
Sure, Commissioner. It was in that very substantial package related to the SSC recommendation. But Barbara, I think it might be useful if we just can send that page, maybe with a cover note in the email to all commissioners, to just share that with them again. That'd be useful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Commissioner Servin.
Thank you, Chair Bain. I think we ought to consider the rescheduling of the July 22nd meeting. We probably ought to put that on the agenda at our next meeting.
It will be in one form or another, but thank you for that. And it's a good reminder to have on the list and in this discussion.
And I guess maybe, do we want to have an agenda item to consider the public outreach contractors public hearing plan?
I think we can plan on an introduction of that contractor, assuming the timeline that Barbara laid out comes to fruition. And I'm sure they'll be able to give us whatever detail they can. Barbara, it's probably a useful staff comment, unless there's objection from other commissioners. If staff could look into talking to the contractor at the appropriate moment, assuming all goes well, to marry up what timelines we've been discussing tonight with the timeline that they offered in their original proposal, the 8-week timeline that Co-Vice Chair Garcia and others have reviewed in detail. And hopefully they could come to the meeting on the 8th with some thoughts on how to bring all that together and what their plan will be given the tentative schedule we adopted tonight.
If I may, Chair Bain, just to clarify, and I'll defer to council, the the posting of the date of the agenda is my only concern in terms of what the language will be there. So it's because of the holiday and when they sign the contract.
Right.
So we might not be able to have a lot of detail. It would be a meet and greet. They could probably share their approach and things of that. But in terms of an actual plan, I don't believe we'd be able to do that just because of the posting.
And don't misunderstand me.
Okay.
Of course, all this is subject to legal and contractual requirements, but as part of their introduction, if they wanted to offer some thoughts and reactions, again, assuming everything goes smoothly and they're ready to come to an introductory meeting and it's all legal and sound, having some specific thoughts related to timeline issues, let's put it that way.
Okay, sounds good.
Not a full-blown plan, but something that would enable enough discussion along the lines of what I think Commissioner Serban was just proposing.
Thank you for the clarification.
No,
yeah, and I'm sorry, Chair Boehm. I think what I meant was that if we reschedule to the 22nd meeting to the 29th, then I think that would be the appropriate meeting to place on the agenda a review of the public hearing plan.
Correct, right. I had the same understanding, but that's good to confirm. Very good. Any other comments? Great. Commissioners, it's been a busy but productive meeting. Really appreciate your patience and continued participation right up through it. It's inspiring, and I mean that seriously. That concludes our business before the Independent Redistricting Commission this evening. The next meeting of the Commission will be Thursday, July 8th at 2 p.m. Please be in touch with staff if you've got any questions or comments between now and then on how things are going. I do want to wish everyone a very happy 4th of July, a holiday I think we'll all agree has additional importance for each of us this year. Your service is appreciated. The meeting is adjourned at 9:02 p.m. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Congratulations to your son.
Congrats on the team.
That may be a longer agenda item, but
indeed, yes.
Meeting. Thank you for saying that. I'll let him know. Have a good night.
Good night.